Yeah, on the road.
Okay, Israel. The water for tuning in again. Shout out Sword of Truth family. Shout out isbhpk family. Hope everybody's doing well out there on the different cities. I mean, I don't want to keep running through all the cities. I mean, that gets repetitive. So we're gonna say Sword of Truth family and isbhpk family and everybody online that's showing their support and listening. We're much appreciated. And today we're going to stay on topic of the themes we've been kind of tapping in on the last few classes we've had on Galatians 3. We haven't forgotten about finishing up Galatians 3. We haven't forgotten about that topic. But it's important that before we focus just on Galatians 3, we have to continue to teach about the background leading up to Galatians 3. We have to teach the times. We have to teach how things were operating in the book of Acts. We have to teach about the history of the... Can you get the truth here? The book and the pocket for the brother. We have to talk about the history of the New Testament, the history where Christ led up to the apostles for the New Testament to make sense, for Galatians 3 to make sense, for all these topics to make sense. So what we're going to do, we need to start back at Acts 21. The last time we read Acts 21, it was dealing with those Israelites who took the message of Paul the wrong way. And they took it very violently.
Yeah.
And they took his message and they felt like they wanted to put this guy 6 feet under because of a message that he was teaching. So we want to make sure that we find out what was this message that was so controversial that would lead grown men to murder. These guys wanted to murder Paul. And what was he saying?
He took vows.
No, he didn't say vows, but they sat back and they wanted this guy dead. Like that old Untouchables movie. I want him dead. I want his whip dead. And they wanted this guy dead. And they came down from Asia, which is in Corinth and Galatia and all those spots, to come down and handle this business. So we want to kind of go back quickly and go back over that part. And then we'll continue on the topic of giving understanding. We are going back to Galatians 3, just not today and maybe not the next week. But we will get it. But we need to make sure the whole picture is painted before we continue on the topic. So, okay.
Let's go. Try to turn it down. There we go.
Okay. So, let's go to Acts chapter 21, verse 17. And we're going to run verse 17 through 36. Then we'll continue on the topic.
Acts chapter 21, verse 17. And when we were come to Jerusalem, and brethren received us gladly, and the day following Paul went with us to James.
Wait, say verse 18 again.
And the day following Paul went in with us unto James, and all the elders were present.
So we want to make sure we're clear with this. They went to Jerusalem, and the brethren in Jerusalem received Paul and Barnabas. The brethren in Jerusalem, well, let me take that back. It didn't say Barnabas. Paul, because Paul and Barnabas had already split up by this time. So the people that were part of the new church, James and everybody that were following Christ, that was still inside of Jerusalem, had embraced Paul. There was still a heavy faction of Israelites that was Torah-only Jews still. That was a real thing in the book of Acts. The synagogue was still going. The Levite priests were still thriving. And the Torah-only faction was still in effect in the synagogue or in Jerusalem, in the capital city. So when Paul came down, he's communicating with that faction of Israelites who were followers of Christ. So now the faith systems were split in two at the time. Does that make sense? Let's continue.
Verse 19. And when he had saluted them, he declared particularly what things the Most High had wrought among the Gentiles by his ministry.
So once again, Paul reiterated how things were going down after the second trip that he had experienced teaching his brothers and sisters in the different cities that were referred to as Gentile or non-Israelite cities. But we also know that these non-Israelite cities were full of Israelites who just didn't know who they were. And as we go and progress in this class, hopefully we'll have time to touch that topic. So let's continue.
And when they heard it, they glorified the Lord.
So that the Israelites who were learning and confessing Christ in Jerusalem glorified the work that Paul was doing in these other cities. Read on.
And said unto him, Thou seest, brother, how many thousands of Jews there were which believed, and they were all zealous of the law.
And they are all zealous of the law.
And they are all zealous of the law.
So now that this is Israelite faction who follows Christ responded to Paul's good news about what he's doing in the different countries, and he's saying now we have a lot of our brothers, our Israelite brothers, who are zealous of the law. Now these guys are following Christ as well. So even the brothers that are in Jerusalem are working on changing the minds of a lot of the Israelites to embrace Christ's teachings. Read on.
Verse 21. And they are informed of thee, that thou teachest all the Jews which are among the Gentiles.
Now listen, this is where, now they're sitting back here, they're listening to Paul, they're listening to his good report. Now they're responding to him with their good report. Now after all the pleasantries are gotten out of the way, now we got to get to the bad news. Now they're saying, they are informed of thee. So there's people, there are reports out there that thou teachest all the Jews which are among the Gentiles to forsake Moses. Now Paul, if you read all throughout Acts, Paul never told anybody to forsake Moses. Christ didn't even tell anybody to forsake Moses. What did Matthew 5 say? Matthew 5 verse 17. All right, let's be quick.
Come.
This is Christ's teaching. Matthew 5 and 17.
Come. Matthew chapter 5 verse 17 reads, Think not that I am come to destroy the law or the prophets.
So Christ didn't come to do away with the law. That's even what Christianity likes to teach. Christ came to do away with the law. Read on.
I am not come to destroy, but to fulfill.
Christ came to fulfill all the prophecies of Christ's all the prophecy that talked about Christ's arrival. And when you read Luke 24 and 45, somebody get that for me also. Hold that. Somebody give me Luke 24 and 45. So Christ came to fulfill the law, fulfill all the prophecies written about him, and then also, if it's 44, cool.
That's 44.
Then let's do it.
Luke chapter 24, verse 44.
Okay.
And he said unto them, These are the words which I spake unto you, while I was yet with you, that all things must be fulfilled, which were written in the law of Moses, and in the prophets, and in the Psalms concerning me.
I wanted 45 also. 44 is good, but I wanted 45. So verse 44 is saying what? That I had to come down. This is after he had died and came back and was operating with the apostles for 30 days. He said, everything, I came down here so I can fulfill everything that was written about me by the prophets. But on top of that, he also came and did what? Read on.
Verse 45. It says, Then opened he their understanding, that they might understand the scriptures.
So the purpose also of him coming down was to give us a greater understanding of what the Bible was talking about. A greater understanding of the scriptures from Genesis all the way to present day in the Bible. So with that being the case, that was what Christ was teaching. Paul was on the same vein of the teaching. It wasn't about discarding the law. It wasn't about saying the law of Moses was bad, or it was wicked, or it was evil. But the problem is, what Paul was teaching went over their heads so much, they assumed that what Paul was saying was to discard the law of Moses. So now they were lying on him. You can say it was a bold-faced lie, or you can say they just didn't understand.
An exaggeration.
Or an exaggeration. Now, if we're going to sit back here and choose to keep a positive outlook towards our people, And you got to choose the fact that they didn't understand. But other people, we're going to read, there were certain people that didn't like Paul's work and were against Paul's work. So it could be stated that the people that are saying these accusations had a real problem with Paul. So let's go back to Acts 21 and verse 21.
Acts 21 and 21 from the top. And they are informed of thee, that thou teachest all the Jews which are among the Gentiles to forsake Moses.
First of all, the funny thing is, Paul's job was not to even teach the Jews.
No.
There were already synagogues set up in Cilicia. We're going to read, if we get to it, I doubt we'll get to it today, in Acts 13. There were already synagogues that already had leaders in those synagogues in Cilicia and all these different areas. So there was no need for Paul to focus his teaching on them. Paul was focusing on Gentiles. But just like if we're sitting back here on the street and we're teaching, I can't control who chooses to do what.
Listen.
To listen. Whether that's Edomites, whether that's Israelites from other camps, from other schools, you're going to get a sort of a cross-pollination of information, a cross-pollination of doctrine that's being taught to other people. But the problem with that is they're going to take it differently, these Jews, than was being taken from the Israelites that didn't know who they were. So these outside Israelites who came from their synagogue to listen to Paul are listening to Paul teach these Gentiles, but then they're saying, oh man, Paul is saying they don't got to sit back and follow the law of Moses, and they don't have to sit back and circumcise. We got to circumcise. What they're saying is this. Read verse 21 again, I'm going to prove it. I'm going to clear it up.
Verse 21. And they are informed of thee, that thou teachest all the Jews which are among the Gentiles to forsake Moses, saying that they ought not to circumcise their children, neither to walk
That's never what he
after the
said.
custom.
And we're going to go into what Paul actually said. But we're going to read into the fact that Paul taught that the outward circumcision wasn't as important as the inward circumcision. So that's what we're going to read that Paul taught. But if I'm an outside person that's disconnected to the Most High and doesn't understand what Christ's message really was, if Paul is saying that the circumcision doesn't matter, those Jews are like, well, I'm already circumcised. So is he saying now all of a sudden that my kids shouldn't be circumcised coming up and I should sit back and not follow the law on my kids? What is he saying? Can you see how a person can listen to a message that Paul is teaching about circumcision and assume that now my progeny that comes after me shouldn't have to get circumcised?
And you're dealing with introductory biblical lessons versus a person who's been learning the Bible for maybe 30, 40 years.
And even with that, you're dealing with these Israelites that were in Cilicia in Europe that's taking his message the wrong way. And the message wasn't even intended for them. So the funny thing is, that's the whole point also. That message wasn't intended for the Hebrews who knew who they were. So, with that being in mind, they're creating these false accusations. And they're interpreting a message about what Paul said that really wasn't true. So now continue.
Verse 22. What is it therefore? The multitude must needs come together, for they will hear that thou art come.
So he says, we have to make sure that it's not full-blown war. And the people have to optically see that we're all together and that you're not against the law. And because of that, they're coming and they need to see that you're doing lawful things and you're abiding by the law, so we can keep peace amongst the Israelites who are Torah only and the Israelites who are following Christ in Jerusalem. Because there was obviously tension there about the different factions of Israelite teaching. We have these tensions now. People are throwing hands and giving people cops procedures, 3-on-1 in people. This is happening now off of doctrine, off of camp banging. Whose leader is more doper than the other?
Yeah.
Is it not that?
Yeah, that's
Isn't it not like what Paul was saying? I'm of Apollos, I'm of Paul.
Mhm.
It's still a set trip type situation. There's nothing new under the sun. Let's not forget that. But let's continue.
Acts 21 and 23. Do therefore this that we say unto thee. We have 4 men which have a vow on them. Take them and purify thyself with them.
Well, first of all, they're giving Paul orders like he's supposed to be under these guys in Jerusalem. They're giving him orders. Take these 4 men that have to purify themselves and go purify yourself with them. This way, optically, the people will see you following the law of Moses. So everybody knows you're down with God. Alright? Read on.
Then take and purify thyself with them, and be at chargers with them, that they may shave their heads.
And I don't know if you guys got a chance to get into it, but the shaving of your heads, it wasn't a complete shaving because that's against the law. It was a trimming of the hair to show that you're willing to purify yourself. It wasn't a complete shaving of the hair. It was more of a pulling. And that was part of the purification process that we went through. And I'll go into another day if we had the time. You didn't? If I had the PKC, I can show it to you. But don't worry about it. Let's go.
God. And all may know that those things whereof they were informed concerning thee are nothing, but that thou thyself art also walkest orderly, and keepest the law.
So they're saying, these Israelites who follow Christ and follow the law in Jerusalem, like if you perform this purification ceremony, you can show these gainsayers that you are pro-law. Because when these people interpreted it, that circumcision, when Paul said circumcision was nothing, when people interpreted it that as a slap in the face, as a spit on all the laws of Moses. So they're ready to kill him for that. So they're saying if you sit back and perform this purification ceremony, you know what? Everything will be okay. They'll see you online and they'll back off you. Let's continue.
Verse 25. And touching the Gentiles which believe, we have written and concluded that they observe no such thing, save only that they keep themselves from the things offered to idols, and from blood, and from the strangled, and from fornication.
Verse 25, we read about that in Acts 15. How they came up with that decision. So it's like we understand that the Gentiles don't have to follow all these detailed laws. We understand that. But they're looking at it as if you're telling the Israelites not to follow the laws anymore, and that's why they want to kill them. Does that make sense?
God.
They're like, we understand that when you're teaching an Israelite that don't know nothing to keep it basic. But they're saying that you're telling the people who know the law that the law is whack and you don't need it. So now these guys are sitting back here. They're looking at what Paul's work is, that you're breaking down and destroying their foundation. So we're going to have to do everything we can to reassure these people that follow the law. It's actually how they're receiving it is opposite of what the Jews were doing to the Gentile people. Remember last week we said how the Israelites were telling the Gentiles you had to follow the law or you're not making a kingdom, and how that floored them on their foundation. Mm-hmm. Now what's happening is they're saying that Paul's message is rocking these people's foundation,
Right.
and making the Jews who are Torah heavy is messing their foundation up, and they're going to respond with murder.
Right.
Yes.
We're in Acts, and it's talking about everything about this conversation Paul had. Is the teaching the actual teaching that Paul had, is that in Romans? Is this in
It's
order?
in everything.
Is this in order?
Not necessarily. Acts is first, but when they say historically, the first book that was after Acts was supposed to be Galatians. At least that's what they say.
And I only speak of Romans because he's actually talking about the law and the
Well, he talks about the law, and he gives the understanding about these topics in all the chapters. He's talking about
okay.
in all the books.
I didn't know.
He references this information. Romans, Galatians. He talks about it everywhere.
Okay.
And Acts is the breakdown of the history of the history and the journeys that Paul took. Romans, Galatians, they're just the individual letters that he was sending to those specific camps.
Okay.
And Acts is the history of all the scenarios.
Exactly.
Explaining it all out.
And that's why, in order to really understand the letters, you have to understand Acts and what he was going through, because the letters were responses to the blowback that the message was bringing out to the people.
Okay.
So he's responding in these letters like Galatia or Corinth, Rome, to all the blowback he's getting for his teaching. Paul is trying to teach the Gentile people. Now the Jews are taking the message and they're vexed at it. Now their foundation is floored, and instead of sitting back here and going to Paul to get understanding, they want to kill him.
Taking offense.
They're taking an offense to it. But Paul's not even trying to go and deal with them. He's focused on his people. Yes, I
wanted to ask real quick because you said something. I don't want to get it straight. Acts is Paul putting it out there, or no?
Being explained.
It's
Acts
history.
is Paul putting it out there.
History of the early
It
church.
would make sense that everything else after Acts is the blowback you were just talking about.
Yes. In your words, yes. Those are your words. I didn't say those
That's
words.
accurate though.
All I said is
I want to make sure. I'm trying to get it right.
Yeah.
that's what I'm saying. For you said yes. I'm saying what we
That
said is
makes
Acts
a lot
the
of sense.
history
Yeah.
of his travels
Early church, yeah.
and his dealings
That clears up a lot.
as he was dealing with the Israelites in different
Wow.
countries,
Mhm.
as he was dealing with the Israelites who didn't know who they were in different countries,
Mhm.
and the responses of the Hebrew church and the early church of Christ in response to what Paul was teaching the people. Okay? Now, let's continue in verse
26.
so 25, they knew the Gentiles were supposed to be dealt with kids' gloves. But now these Israelites are listening to Paul's message, and they're taking it like you don't got to follow the law anymore. And this is, listen, how they're responding to Paul is how a lot of Israelites respond to Paul now. Which is why a lot of Israelites avoid Paul's teachings. Because a lot of them really aren't comfortable teaching it. And what they say is, this is real Christian. They'll communicate like it's super Christian-y, it's super churchy. Let's avoid it. Let's just focus on Esau's the devil that the Bible speaks of. We're going to focus on this Edomite stuff, and the kingdom of Babylon is falling. Let's keep talking about kingdom of Babylon, and we're going to connect Edom with Babylon and by the rivers of Babylon. Like, damn! They focus there because going into this comes off like Paul, if you don't understand, that's why we went to 2 weeks ago about in Peter's, how Paul said, when Peter said, listen, if you don't have an understanding of the Bible, what Paul's message going to do is throw you off all the way left. This is why we're taking our time with it. And it seems like we're going back over it twice per week, because we got to keep taking this, and there's a reaction to it. This, and then there's a reaction to it. So, we understand that, right? And we understand how these Hebrews that are pro-Torah are taking it the wrong way. Because they're taking Paul's message as if Paul is spitting on the law of Moses. And and they're taking it as if Paul is saying the law is done away with, or it's not necessary anymore. So because of that, Israel is going to try to MOB this guy out. They're going to try to get him out. No. Let's continue.
Verse 26. Then Paul took the men, and the next day, purifying himself with them, entered into the temple, to signify the accomplishment of the days of purification, until that an offering should be offered for every one of them.
So Paul did what he was supposed to do to keep the peace. He followed the law. He went through the purification process with 4 of the men, and now he went into the temple, and the priests were going to sit back and make an offering for him. So what it's showing you also is he's in the literal temple. He's in the temple in Jerusalem. This is after the veil had fallen, and according to Christ, the sacrifice of animals were really done away with when Christ died. But Paul is still sitting back here going through the whole process of about to sacrifice an animal to purify him. He's going through the mechanical process even after Christ died. Right? To show respect and to stay out of trouble with these guys.
And that he's not changing anything.
Yes, that I'm not trying to be a rebel rouser. I am pro-law. I am not against the law.
There's no deviation.
Exactly. So now let's keep going.
Verse 27. And when the 7 days were almost ended, the Jews which were of Asia.
The Jews that were of Asia. You see on the map, you got Asia. There was Cilicia, was a major hub where Israelites taught, where Israelite synagogues were at. I want to say synagogues because we know synagogues are Jewish churches. So in Asia, there were a lot of Jewish churches going on. So there were Jews of Asia that noticed he was out here in Jerusalem, and they wanted to go touch him. Read verse 27 again.
Come. And when the 7 days were almost ended, the Jews which were of Asia, when they saw him in the temple, stirred up all the people and laid hands on him.
Oh, this is bad. So they caught him slipping. They snatched him up, and it's what they do is like Jake. They'll snatch you, hold you so you can't run. Then they'll bring everybody's attention on you. Hey, this is Paul. Paul was doing wickedness. He was evil. He was wicked. He was committing sacrilege, and they're holding him. And what's Paul gonna do, man? You gonna say no? That's a lie. Now it's a mob. They're creating a mob. You can't win this. Read on.
Crying out, men of Israel, help! This is the man.
Help Israel. We have a serious matter at hand. I've got this man hostage. He was doing wicked. You gonna sit back and let this wicked man destroy your children?
Yeah, overboard.
Tell your children they can't. You can't circumcise your children no more.
But they wouldn't follow the law anyway.
God.
He wasn't following the law.
But you are ready to kill a man because your understanding is off.
You're so zealous.
Because you love the Lord. This was the hypocrisy. This story clearly paints. You can get rid of it. This story clearly paints how thrilled they were.
And I'm not trying to make it carnal, but it's very
close. Everybody.
It's very close to the dissension when you deal with NOI, Nation of Islam. How they had an issue with Malcolm X over time. They had factions within the group. And when Malcolm went off a code, he went off of the Islamic the political Islamic code in the 60s that he was pushing.
Right.
They had a political Islamic code they spoke of and they taught under the quote-unquote honorable Elijah Muhammad. And when Malcolm X started speaking off of his premise and off of the cuff of his message, there became dissension in the organization, and then certain people split to him, and then certain people split to Elijah Muhammad, and then he was assassinated within his own group by the help of the CIA. Right? But what does it show? It shows when you have organizations and these coups and these murder attempts and these assassination attempts based off political vision. So Israel has so here comes Paul with a upgraded, clear, more filtered, forward spiritual vision that he got from Christ that the people weren't ready to accept.
And now their response is, he's trying to take away the law and the foundation of the Hebrew people. I gotta kill him. We're gonna read it, verse 28.
God, Acts chapter 21, verse 28. Crying out, men of Israel, help! This is the man that teaches all men everywhere.
Stop. He's not teaching all men everywhere. He's teaching the Israelites that don't know who they are. Read on.
That teaches all men everywhere against the people and the law and this place.
So he's saying, Paul is going around saying, F the law. F the law, F the temple, F Jerusalem. That's what they're saying. And F the Israelites in Jerusalem.
Yeah. And what it shows,
they're really blowing this out of proportion, and they're feeding and fueling lies.
Yeah. Well, it also shows that they didn't have the intellectual capacity to understand it.
And it's just like movies. You're saying a bunch of big words, and I don't know what you're saying. So I'm gonna take it as disrespect.
There you go.
So watch your mouth.
There you go.
And now we're gonna snatch him up because we don't understand, and we're gonna put hands on him and kill him. There's gonna be a mob, and we're gonna do what we gotta do with him. Let's keep going.
And further brought Greeks also into the temple.
So now he's like, they're bringing Greeks in. What's going on here?
They're not bringing white boys in the
He's
temple.
not bringing Edomites to the temple.
That'd be so stupid.
Even if they're saying they're bringing Israelites who roll like Greeks in the temple.
Yeah.
That's probably what they're saying. But they're trumping charges on them that aren't even real.
And they're inflaming the people too.
And they're pissing them off. Read on. But they're purposely pissing them off, huh? Read on.
And have polluted this holy place.
Oh man, now she's polluting the holy place. Read on.
For they had seen before with him in the city
Trophimus,
and
Ephesian.
whom they supposed that Paul had brought into the temple.
They supposed that Paul brought him in. They didn't know. They thought that they saw an Ephesian who rode like an Ephesian, walked in the temple, and they just assumed Paul did it. And they can't even prove Paul did it.
Bearing false witness.
They're lying on him, right? But they're saying, well, you know what they're going to say? How else would he come down unless Paul told him it was okay? That's what they're implying. Yes.
I guess these other guys, were they following Christ?
These guys that were starting up the fighting, they were from the synagogues. They were pro Torah and Moses, the law of Moses.
And slash.
What's that?
So I know that they were pro Torah, but were they following Christ? I guess at this point.
I would say no, because at the time there was different factions going on, and you had your synagogue pro law of Moses, then you had teachers that taught Christ. It was all mixed up. It was just, hold 1 second. Synagogues, law only, Moses only. Then you had Christ and the law of Moses. And then you had, well, the Pharisees actually with the scribe, but with the synagogue. And then you had Paul, who was out there teaching Israelites, and had his understanding of the doctrine that he was learning. You had all those three different groups in there. So whether you had a guy who was pro synagogue, or it was Christ and the law, what this guy's words were saying was going to inflame them both. The only person that had a greater understanding was Paul and his students. So he was he was in Jerusalem. So let's keep going. What was you going to say? I'm sorry.
No, I was just going to say that point, that there were Israelites that, believed and came from only following the law, and now they're recently starting to follow Christ. So they still had minimal understanding of what Christ is about, but they were transitioning. So it would still, be a reason why they'd be so angry about it. Yeah, they may be trying to follow Christ, but we don't understand him yet. So they're still going on their old beliefs, their own ways.
So let's keep going.
Verse 30. And all the city was moved, and the people ran together, and they took Paul.
That means a mob. They came together. It was a mob, and it was yelling and cussing, and they got him, and they're punching him, they're hitting him in his damn face and the body, spitting on him,
Man.
It was the whole thing. Shame. Shame.
Hey, and it was just cool just a second ago.
It was just cool a second ago. Well, let's keep going.
And they took Paul and drew him out of the temple, and forthwith the doors were shut.
Brother, and the priest didn't look out for him. The same people that saw him get cleaned and saw him go through the purification ceremony, they saw him follow the law. Nobody defended him. They closed the door shut and said, if he dies, he dies. Yeah. They gave him the Ivan Drago, all right?
These are the guys that
they gave him the Drago, all right? These are supposed to be holy men that are so righteous, that are all about the Torah.
Yeah.
But they didn't care about that this guy was about to get murdered unjustly. They just closed the doors. Read on. It just shows you the hypocrisy of these guys. They're like, if they want him dead, let him, who cares?
Exactly.
Plus, I'm sure there was ways to go about disagreements.
Oh, he's going to go into it. Listen, everybody's favorite bad guy, the white man, had to come in there and stop and save these animals from killing themselves. Right? How about that one?
Wow.
We're gonna read it. Let's go.
Verse 31. And as they went about to kill him.
So listen, they were taking turns stomping on him, right? They were about to kill him. Think about this. Everybody was getting their punches and their swings in, right? He was getting beat up. He had to be in the fetal position. You got 10, 15, 30, 40 men stomping on you. They said they were about to kill him.
But we don't know numbers, right? Could have been more, right?
Could have been more.
Said all the city.
The whole city came out. Because you know Israelite, when there's some shit going on, they either your spidey senses tell you and you leave, but some people when it's drama, they go right to it. They go right to what's going on. And they love it. Some people love it. They love seeing fights. I hate it, but some people love it. Who's fighting? Oh, let's see it. He stole on him.
Balls come out of that.
Nobody's breaking up nothing. And they said, you ever see in school there, you got two people close, and then one dude in the back pushes them, and then they get into it, and then the fight is on.
Yeah.
And they manufactured the fight.
Right.
I'm sorry, Mr.
No, it's a fact, but
They manufacture chaos. That's our people.
here comes the devil that the Bible speaks of.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah.
Here comes.
Man, I've seen people get disfigured.
Paul be going through
disfigured in a jump situation.
I know that.
Like faces and heads just smashed.
And it can be permanent. And don't forget, this ain't the first time he got beat down. He got stolen to death in Iconium. All because he taught the right thing with the purest intention. So Israelites were snatching him up. He was almost about to get killed. Read verse 31 again.
And as they went about to kill him, tidings came down unto the chief captain of the band that all Jerusalem was in an uproar.
Listen, they had to somebody had to call the cops out.
Yep.
Somebody had to call the cops. Somebody had to call the Italian band, the Romans, the centurions, to come up in here and put some order in the situation.
Law and order.
Exactly.
We're a nation of law and order.
Ding, ding.
They didn't push that
But let's keep going.
because they don't want to be beastly.
Yeah.
Verse 32, who immediately took soldiers and centurions and ran down unto them.
How many? They had to bring soldiers and centurions? This was a mob.
It's like jail. When you had to bring the turtles out, the turtles come out. Start hitting us with legs.
Oh, you mean those guys with those?
They come in and start
That's
breaking everybody
crazy,
down.
Yes.
SWAT.
Yeah.
No, he caught it,
In
right?
jail, they call them turtles out, and they come through and they just start banging everybody up.
Because you got soldiers and you got centurions, which were higher level military.
Yeah.
They had to bring elite guards to pull these thugs off of them. This is crazy. All off lies. You know what it shows? Israel was looking to give people licks out. You got people that are looking at this to beat or F something up just to look for an opportunity to do it.
And their own people.
Whoever.
But so, yeah.
I'm looking for a reason to put hands on people. All you do is say a couple lies and they on you. So let's continue,
And when they saw the chief captain and the soldiers, they left beating of Paul.
Oh yeah, cop, the feds, get out of the way, get out of the way.
It's Jake.
Is that not Jake?
It's Jake all day.
Come on,
Scared like ants.
You see all those videos, those old 90s videos where Jake is sitting back here selling drugs in a corner with their 40-ounce bottles and the cops come around and everybody scatters and runs out? I don't know, it might be a little dating myself, but point is, that was the image of how Jake did with law enforcement. So they're doing dirt. They knew they were doing dirt. And when the centurions came, they all scattered. I make sure that they knew there was a guilty conscience there. If they didn't do nothing wrong, why would they run? Anyway, let's continue.
Then the chief captain came near and took him, and commanded him to be bound with 2 chains, and demanded who he was and what he had done.
He was beat up, and like what? They put chains. They put chains on him, like he did something.
That's all the way.
And then what you do, man? For these guys to get you like this. What's your name? What you do? What were you doing to get beat up by all these guys?
Right.
Golly, read on.
Verse 34. And some cried one thing, some another among the multitude. And when he could not know the certainty for the tumult,
The cops didn't know who was telling the truth.
Yeah.
So if they don't know the truth, they're gonna bring you in. And normally they'll bring everybody that had to do something in.
There's too many people.
But it's too many people. So let me just bring that one guy in and do some questioning on him. Read on.
he commanded him to be carried into the castle. And when he came upon the stairs, so it was that he was born of the soldiers for the violence of the people.
The soldiers had to carry him up. He couldn't walk, bro. He was beat up so bad that the soldiers had to carry him up the steps, up the stairs. Read verse 35 again.
Verse 35, Acts 21 and 35. And when he came upon the stairs, so it was that he was born of the soldiers for the violence of the people.
Brother, they had to carry him going up the stairs. How many of us had to go through this for teaching the word of the Most High? None of us, but all of us are complaining. How many of us complain about working and hours and our little crappy lives? I gotta work, I gotta lock into my husband. I got all these things to say, but it ain't nothing in comparison to what this man had to go through for just teaching the word of Christ. Read on.
Verse 36. For the multitude of the people followed
So the
after.
people were following, cursing him out. That shame thing in damn Game of Thrones, They were cursing him out, embarrassing him. He could barely walk. And what'd they say?
Crying, away with him.
This dude, let's kill this nigga, man. I don't want to get too lewd.
That's the
on
interview.
my God. Well, kill him, man. Kill him dead. They wanted him gone. All he did was teach his people and go down to Jerusalem to give a report about the good work he was doing. So, hold that, and we're going to sit back here and go into the scriptures to try to find out what did he say that was so bad. Okay, so let's do this. Let's go to, I want to go back to the Old Testament first. We got it on there. To just explain the history of where Paul ain't the first guy to talk about circumcision ever. Let's go to Deuteronomy chapter 10, verse 16.
God.
Deuteronomy chapter 10 and verse 16. So we can understand where this circumcision concept was even initially talked about from even Moses himself.
God.
Read that.
Deuteronomy chapter 10, verse 16. Circumcise therefore the foreskin of your heart, and be no more stiff-necked.
This is what even Moses was saying. Circumcise your mind. Your heart is referring to your mind. And he was saying that the circumcision had to come from your mind because Israel was too hard-headed. Israel was too stubborn. Israel was unwilling to change. So when Paul was talking about circumcision, all he's saying, we're going to go into more details of what he said, but the understanding is, what good is a physical circumcision if you're still stubborn and stiff-necked in your mind? And all that stubbornness inside of you negates the physical circumcision. Because the physical circumcision was supposed to represent the spiritual change. No different than physically getting dumped in water was supposed to represent cleansing the inside. What was you going to say?
No, I just wanted to add on to that. This is why a lot of Christians think there's a difference between the New Testament and the Old Testament. Because they'll say the New Testament is only about love, about peace, and about joy. But if you read verse 12, it was still talking about the same thing in the Old Testament. Read that in verse 12 real quick.
God. Deuteronomy chapter 10, verse 12. And now, Israel, what does the Lord thy God require of thee?
So Moses is about to let us know, what does the Most High really want from us? Is it about just following these laws and just following these rules and make sure you're sharp on these rules? Or what was the deeper meaning behind the rules? Read on.
But to fear the Lord thy God, to walk in all his ways.
So part of the circumcision of the mind is you need to change your outlook on how you look at the Most High. Are you just following me just because you're told to follow me, or do you actually fear the consequences? That's the first part. But there's more than that. Read.
And to love him.
So are you following me just because you fear me, or are you following me because you're starting to love me? The problem is in the Old Testament, we had a hard heart. We didn't love our people, and we didn't love the Most High. Well, the circumcision of the mind is you're transitioning to now I'm following you because I love serving you. I love being following the work of the Most High in Christ. Read on.
God. And to serve the Lord thy God with all thy heart and with all thy soul.
So the circumcision of the heart is the sincerity behind why you do what you do.
Exactly. That's why Paul talks about the conscience so much. People don't understand that fear evolves into love. People don't look at the understanding of how the Most High operates. You start off with fear in anything. Fear is respect.
Yeah.
Fear is irrespective of the consequences that come from not following a certain thing a certain way. But then once you get past the fear or the consequences of losing something, then like he said, your motivation becomes pure. A pure form of motivation isn't fear. The purest form of motivation is love. But people don't understand. They'll read a New Testament concept of love, and they'll say, see, you're supposed to love the Most High, not fear him. It's not that. You understand that fear is the end result of your spiritual maturity.
And just to add on to that, you know our people didn't love or fear the Most High because we were always making sacrifices. Every year we were sacrificing for the same sins over and over again. And this is why Christ came back to do away with the sacrifice, because it wasn't doing anything. The blood of the lambs weren't changing your heart. You didn't feel bad about killing your first lamb, your first cow, your money. Look, $200 hit wasn't going to hurt anything. That's why people break speeding laws all the time. It's all right. It hurts for a month, but you're going to recoup next month. So it's okay.
Or all you got to do is sit back here and extend it. Go hardship, pay $50 a month. You be all right. You do $50 a month. You go there. You be inconvenienced for 4 months. You be all right.
It's a little inconvenience, but it's still
just don't speed at the school zone. That's the one that hurts you. School zone speeding breaks you. That's $350, $400. But a regular thing on a 35, it's all good. You can sit back and plead out. If the judge is cool, he'll just throw it out, or he'll let you just pay half and be done with it. It's the truth.
Play that sad face in front of the judge.
Yep. I got 5 kids to feed, Your Honor. I got 5 kids to feed, Your Honor.
Never change, right?
Anyway, what you got there?
But it is proved that we didn't have even the basic necessity to serve God, which was fear. I didn't fear. All I had to do was just give these lambs up and sit in line all day. All right, I'll chalk it up. I chalked the inconvenience up rather than actually changing. And then eventually evolving to loving the service of God. We didn't like the service of the Most High. We had to.
And what he's explaining is talked about in Hebrews. This is why we're once again, this is still the intro of what we're going into all the New Testament, so we have a better understanding of it. You done with that?
Yeah, I'm done.
Now we're going to go to Jeremiah chapter 4, verse 4. It wasn't just Paul talking about it. Jeremiah talked about it.
Jeremiah chapter 4, verse 4.
Jeremiah 4 and 4.
God. Circumcise yourselves to the Lord.
Matter of fact, read that, then read verse 3.
God. Circumcise yourselves to the Lord, and take away the foreskins of your heart.
He's telling you, listen, all throughout the scriptures, the theme is the same. Right. Circumcise your mind. Break that stubbornness in your heart. Learn to love your people. Learn to love the Most High. Read on.
Ye men of Judah and inhabitants of Jerusalem, lest my fury come forth like fire.
And he's trying to, he's like, if you don't change, I'm gonna flip and put you in captivity. This Jeremiah 4 was before what? The fall of the nation. Before the fall of the southern kingdom in 586 BC. This is before 586 BC.
So they were already circumcised in the flesh.
They were already physically circumcised. And they followed the law, and it wasn't good enough because they were stiff-necked in the mind. They didn't want to change. Read on.
And burn that none can quench it.
So what's happening is the Most High is trying to use fear as a motivation. But the motivation of fear just isn't working. It doesn't matter how many things he takes away from you. We just kept being rebellious. This is where the concept of the new covenant came in. Like, listen, it's not like the old covenant was wicked. It's just you guys can't sit back here and follow the old covenant the right way.
Properly.
You don't have it in you. So I got to sit back here and reestablish how I'm judging you and try to get you to see it from a different lens.
And remember, the law was a school master, meaning when you're learning, you're being educated in elementary school, you have to learn your basic concepts. Addition, subtraction, right? Coloring inside the lines, right? So you're given very simple principles, and when Christ comes, he's supposed to, as we were going to early in the scripture about, say he expanded their understanding of the scriptures. But the issue is if he was given, listen, what Paul was teaching was already choking the guys who had small understanding.
To the one to kill him.
So we couldn't just skip to that understanding. They're already choking. And this is not 1,000, but this is Israel being established since Moses. All of a sudden, you're choking on the information. All this is a more advanced form. If you're being baptized in water, you're cleaning your body. You don't think you have to clean your mind?
They didn't get it.
Come on, that's not a hard concept. Clean your body, clean your mind. Israel stuck on just the ceremony.
But I'm going to say this. I'm not going to lie to you. A lot of times Israel in 2023 is stuck on ceremony.
Yeah.
We want to sit back and just bang on the Southern Kingdom Jews in Jerusalem time and Paul time. We're stuck on ceremony.
Right.
Listen, a lot of the nation doesn't focus on what's inside of you and your intentions and your motivations and your reasoning for doing things. If we're going to be honest.
It was never wrong.
Even when you look at the aspects of wearing fringes, brothers will get mad that you're not wearing fringes, but forget the fringes, or you wear fringes, and you're still making mistakes. The fringe is supposed to be your representation of what's going on in your mind. You're constantly correcting.
No, bro smoke cigarettes with fringes.
Exactly.
That's the point. So what does the fringes?
You're a bullshit. I'd say online. I've seen brothers rock fringes.
I know. And take a cig break behind the back of the school.
And you're sigging.
What do you do?
And then you're talking to Jake. You're talking to Jake with the fringes on. Like, yeah, man. I'm like, damn, brother.
Yeah, your fringes.
You're tripping.
But then they'll sit back here.
Take them off. Take the fringes off.
But then they'll say, listen. But then you offer them some water, and they'll say, was this water bought on the Sabbath, brother?
Oh. The righteous man is spoken.
I bought these cigarettes on Thursday. I'm good.
Because that's Sabbath.
I bought these cigarettes on Thursday, so it's okay. I can smoke.
Twisted.
It's okay.
Yeah. Twisted Jews.
This is the Jews. This is the Hebrew condition.
Now.
I'm not even lying.
It's real events.
This is real stuff. They will not light a fire on a Saturday. And miss the whole thing. They'll miss the whole understanding of what this is about.
Start the car.
That's fire.
That's an ignition.
Cutting on the ignition is fire. And then if you're gonna take the bus, you're going on another vehicle that's being ignited by fire.
Well, I didn't start that one.
Doesn't matter. You're in the vehicle of a person who started it.
But
you see how overly technical and stupid you got to get with people.
But our people have a they don't understand the practical element of the scriptures. Christ is sitting here trying to get some food, or David in the showbread. Better example. David had to pull showbread off because his men were hungry. Mm-hmm. Does David hate God now? You gonna beat David up?
Yep.
He hates God because he had to eat with the showbread. So Israel understands if it's their property. Israel's not practical with other people until it's them. Oh, my sheep's in a pit. I can't let my sheep die. No, it's the blessing of the Lord. We're one-way judges. When it's your house, when it's your sheep, when it's your oxen,
it's easy to understand practicality.
When
it's hard to understand practicality when it's somebody else's battle that they're going.
Yeah.
Let's kind of.
The real point is we're getting the picture of the history.
And that's what all we're trying to do. But go to Jeremiah 5. That one in Jeremiah 5 is good. Then we'll go back to Jeremiah 4.
One quick question. So the circumcision is the establishment of the law.
The circumcision is your acknowledgement that you're following law. That was the covenant given to Abraham in Genesis 17.
Okay. That's
Circumcision. Circumcision is the act of removing the foreskin of the male genitalia.
right.
Right? In the ancient Israel, this act was ritually performed on the 8th day after birth upon children of natives, servants, and aliens. Leviticus 9:3.
But it was done. But it was done to prove that I am a follower of the entire Torah.
Come.
That's what it represented. That I was following the law and I was a commandment keeper.
Yeah.
Okay. What you gonna say?
No, and if you want to get even more specific, we haven't gone there yet, but there's also an acknowledgement that I'm going to have the same faith that Abraham had.
Yeah.
And that's what Romans 4 goes into.
Yeah. It's an acknowledgement that I'm locked into Abraham.
Yeah.
But I'm holy. I'm spiritual. I'm spiritual because I follow these laws. So we're gonna let that go and go to no, not let it go. We're just gonna go to Jeremiah 5 and 2 or 5 and 3. Let's go to Jeremiah 5 and 3.
Okay. Jeremiah chapter 5 verse 3.
Keep the energy up.
O Lord,
And keep the energy up.
come. Are not thine eyes upon the truth? Thou hast stricken them.
Thou hast stricken them.
Thou hast stricken them. But they have not grieved.
The Most High is trying to say, I have used all type of fear tactics possible, and it ain't changing these suckers, huh? How many times you gotta yell at somebody, take something from somebody, yell and scream, push-ups, consequences? It don't matter, right?
Jail.
And you threaten people with slavery, and then Tupac, I wonder if heaven got a ghetto. No. That's the whole mindset, right? You are loving the ghetto.
Yeah.
That's punishment. Why do you want ghetto in heaven when ghetto was the punishment for not being with the Most High?
You don't think hell to heaven.
That's the point. But this is the Most High. I've stricken them, and they just keep coming back and accepting it. Fear ain't working for these guys. Loss ain't working for these guys. They just adapt. Israel just adapts. We don't die, we multiply. We do all kind of craziness, right?
Yeah.
What you gonna say?
No, Lil Durk said, he said, heaven, he said, heaven is the gangster party,
Heaven is the gangster party,
I guess I use my Pac angle. He's got Lil Durk angles.
That's new,
I guess.
that's new generation.
That's new gen. Heaven is a gangster party.
Are you serious? What does that mean? They're smoking weed up in heaven? Is that what they doing?
Whatever gangsters do, that's what they're doing.
They're drinking dark liquor in the kingdom.
The first is definitely from there.
And they're drinking Hennessy in the kingdom.
All gangsters go to heaven, huh?
All gangsters go to heaven.
Find us some yak.
It's got to be some yak somewhere in the kingdom. If it ain't yak, it ain't the kingdom. This is horrible.
It's loud music and sea walks out.
Biggie say, when I die, I want to go to hell.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, he's right.
But okay, I think we got enough songs. I wish everybody here can pull a rap lyric that coincides with this message. All I'm trying to say is that the Most High is like, I'm stricken them, and they're not grieved, they're not self-reflective, they're not saying that I got to change. This isn't working. Fear isn't working. So we got to scatter these guys out and hope to teach them about love. Maybe if we push love and considering your brother and not having hatred and enmity in your heart, maybe you'll snap out of it then. This is the message that the Most High is like, how do I get to these guys? I have to change the approach. Christ, you're going to have to show these guys what the hell we mean. You're right, Father. I'll be down there. So now Paul is doing the same thing and getting attempted murders on this guy, huh? I'm not going to the fallow ground. There's no need for it. I think we got the point. Oh yeah, read on to verse 3.
God, thou hast consumed them, but they have refused to receive correction. They have made their faces harder than a rock. They have refused to return.
Exactly. They've refused to change, get the message, and come back to the Most High. They've refused to get the understanding. Okay, let that go, and let's go now to Mark. Let's go to Mark 7 verse 18.
Come on. It's Mark 7:18, huh?
7 and 18 through 18 through 23.
On the night shift.
Israel suffering out here today, man. Listen, Israel is suffering out here. They're suffering in San Antonio. The babies are suffering in San Antonio today, man. He's having a bad day, man. It's okay, man. We all have bad days like that, I guess.
Mark chapter 7 and verse 18. And he saith unto them, Are ye so without understanding also? Do ye not perceive that whatsoever thing from without entereth into the man, it cannot defile him?
Christ is trying to explain that outside things isn't what destroys a person. You can look at that on multiple ways, but whether I have fringes on me doesn't defile me or not. Whether I have fringes or not doesn't defile me, doesn't make me corrupt. How I look on the outside.
The external.
How I look on the outside, how I present on the outside doesn't make me any more wiser or spiritual than anybody else. He's directly attacking the leadership of the nation. What you have to understand when you read about the Pharisees, the major issue that Christ had with the Pharisees, was their elitist approach to things. The Pharisees were all about the look, all about how they were perceived on the outside, and they looked down on the sick. They looked down on the people who were struggling and just couldn't figure it out. They looked down on the people that were slower, less intelligent, less sharp.
Yeah. Less studied.
Don't forget, the Pharisees were what? They were lawyers.
Lawyers,
They were heavy in the books and reading and learning, and it came natural to them. Diplomacy, politics, communication, spoke multiple languages. That was what your Pharisees were. They were educated. They were the elites. And they looked down on the people that didn't have the finances, the money, and the capability to deal with them. And you got to understand, Jerusalem was like the elite city. Don't forget, when David set up the city, it was for all the elites of the world, of the country. Yeah. All the poor and the destitute and the regular cats was on the outside of Jerusalem. So they were looked down. But by the time you got to the Pharisees in Christ's time, they were looking down on everybody. And so Christ understood that about the Pharisees. He says, it's not about all that outside stuff. It's not about how you're perceived and how you're looked at. That's not important. Read on.
Mark chapter 7, verse 19.
So listen, what Christ is saying is exactly what Paul is saying. It's not about the circumcision. Because the circumcision is an outward cutting also. Read on.
Because it entereth not into his heart, but into the belly, and goeth out into the draught, purging all meats.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, that which cometh out of a man, that defileth the man.
So listen, what people like to use in Mark 7, verse 18 and 19, is a justification to eat pork.
Yeah.
They will pull this verse all day long. See, this is about eating squid. I can eat squid right here. I can eat pork right here. That's not the point. He's explaining how Israel operates on the outside versus the inside. Read on.
For from within.
No, read verse 20.
Come, Mark 7 and 20. And he said, that which cometh out of the man, that defileth the man.
He says, the things that come from out of a person is what defiles you and destroys you. Read on.
For from within, out of the heart of men, proceed evil thoughts, and adulteries, fornications, murders.
Read on.
Theft, covetousness, wickedness, deceit, lasciviousness, an evil eye.
Stop. Some of these things that he's explaining, you can't quantify it with the law.
An evil eye? You
can't quantify an evil eye from the law.
Yeah.
You could be a perfect law guy and still have an evil eye. You can follow the law and have evil thoughts.
Right. Have pride.
You can have pride. That's the thing. There's a lot of things that come from within that can't be evaluated from just following the Ten Commandments.
You can hate your brother and keep the law.
That's where the evil eye kicks in. So Christ is saying, listen, man, what's from inside of you is what defiles you. And a lot of those things that defile you, you can't see it because the law doesn't expose it all.
And how's the law going to break grudges?
Because the thing is this, exactly. It can't. Because even if there's a law about stealing. If I steal something from you, I got to give you double back. You caught me, dog. I stole from you. Here's your stuff back, man. And I double it. Hey, let's go roll out tomorrow, man. Let's go hang out tomorrow. What's the law on that? I gave you I stole a turtle dove. I gave you two back.
I gave you two back.
Now what?
That's the law.
Now there's beef there, bro.
Right.
The law don't fix an evil outlook. Beef.
Trust
Trust issues. Where does it say that in the law? It doesn't.
It doesn't.
It just says payback. Or if I sit back here and I accidentally kill you, you can go and run off to a sacred city, a refuge city. But the thing, nobody deals with your hatred.
Yeah.
Nobody deals with the hatred in your heart, and you got to let it go and forgive.
On both ends.
On both ends.
Mm-hmm.
That's not talked about. Yes, sir?
I thought that was accidental.
Even, listen,
That's
if
what-
I accidentally killed your brother, is that going to make me feel a little better about it?
That's what-
Somebody killed my cousin.
Or your
Yeah.
kids.
It's still,
accident.
It's still gonna be
They need to.
animosity because that life is gone.
It's an accident.
You can't bring that life back.
That's the point.
Exactly.
It's still beef.
Mm-hmm.
If it wasn't beef, why would the law say you can go to the city? Get out of here.
Involuntary manslaughter today.
To make sure you don't want to take it upon your own self and kill that man's blood.
Sure.
That law was set up to neutralize the carnal, not to deal with the spirit.
And if I'm
Because
not,
if it was really accidental, why does he got to go to a whole new city and start his life over again?
Exactly.
Because that was to protect him from your bitterness.
Mm-hmm.
That law doesn't solve what's inside of you.
Right.
And a lot of the law doesn't settle and solve the evil and wickedness that's inside of our heart, our evil conscience and motivation. And this is what when Christ was saying about the Pharisees in Matthew 23, how they were whited sepulchres on the outside. How the priests were sitting back here, there on the outside they looked perfect,
Right.
but on the inside it was nothing but death and destruction inside. So Christ was trying to teach and develop us from the inside out. Paul was trying to do the same. They both were misunderstood. But even with that, they weren't saying that the Old Testament was off. It wasn't the message. It was the people that polluted the message. It wasn't the message. It wasn't the law. It was that people thought that's all you had to do to be looked upon as being righteous. You know what the Pharisees thought? If you're book smart and you're okay with reading books all damn day long, then you're righteous. I'm intelligent enough to go through these scrolls and read these stories. And because of that makes me righteous over somebody who don't read, who don't study that much. That was really what the Pharisees thought. I can look down on people because they don't study like I study. They haven't carved out a career like I've carved out.
Which is academic elitism and classism.
Yeah.
Those are the two factors we're dealing with.
And Paul said, even with what you're doing, you're still wicked inside.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then that same classism happened. There was classism between Israel, the elites in Israel, the Pharisees, and your regular people. Then there was elitism between Israelites who didn't know who they were and the Israelites who did know who they were. There was elitism across the board. It's always been about elitism and the taking advantage of the weak, the looking down on the weak, the treating the weak like crap. It's always been since the beginning of time. And this is what Christ was trying to teach amongst our people, to love one another and to not look down on the sick, to not look down on the person who just can't figure it out. That's what it is. Okay, read on in Mark.
Come on, Mark 7:21. For from within, out of the heart of man, proceed evil thoughts, adulteries, fornications, murders, thefts, covetousness, wickedness, deceit, lasciviousness, an evil eye, blasphemy, pride, foolishness.
And a lot of this, especially with the elites, were done without people knowing it. Listen, you can sit back. I'll never forget in high school. I always go back to this. The smartest people in my school back in the day were the best at cheating. I don't know if you ever knew that. Like the honors people, all the honors kids, the smart guys, they were good cheaters, bro. The smart kids were even smarter about cheating. They weren't sloppy. They didn't have like the cheat sheet where the teacher could see it, and then they get caught. That was the dummy did that. The dummy sat back here and would put all the ends on his hand and he sweated out. Oh shit! That was the not smart guy in school. Like, oh, I didn't know I was gonna sweat. Oh, I failed. Or the paperwork is easy to be seen. There's nothing here, teacher. No. Everything's good. No, don't do it. Don't do it. No! Like the smart kids were more sophisticated about the dirt they did. That's even with the Most High. So the elite sin, it was harder to be seen by everybody in public. They were still sinning. You just couldn't see it. So when Christ came on the scene, he was pointing out their wickedness, and they wanted him dead.
They didn't like that.
They wanted him dead. You see, he was the only one that could point out their crap. He knew what they did behind closed doors. That was the message. That was what he was dealing with. But they would do this dirt behind closed doors, but look down on Israel, who was weak and sinned, outwardly, so everybody can see it. That happens now. There's certain Israelites where they can't cover their flaws, and their flaws are so easy to be seen. They're just walking targets. Then the smart guy, he can hide and side swipe his dirt, and nobody sees it.
It's lasciviousness.
It's wickedness. But now I'm going to look at you like you're a dirtbag because you can't hide your weakness. But I can. I'm smart.
Smarter than you.
I'm smart. And that's a form of wickedness. And this is why Christ is like, what's inside of you is what makes you wicked. Not how well you can cover things up on the outside. This was the message he was explaining in Mark. Because Israel is the king of covering up. And like we always say, when you cover things up, what ends up happening is it takes longer for the ones that cover up well to get the lesson they're supposed to get. Because their life is all about covering up, then you're wasting time. You might as well say what the problem is so we can fix it early. But let's continue.
Verse 23, all these evil things come from within and defile the man.
Exactly. So you know what? What's inside of you and how well people cover it up is why people are disconnected from Christ.
Wow.
So we're going to let that go. And we're going to go now to Romans 7:22. You're going to go to your other one in a second.
Okay.
It was in Corinthians, I think, right? Yeah, I think it was Corinthians 7. Was it first or second?
Where do we start in Mark 7? I'm sorry, what verse?
18. It was 7, 18 to 23.
Yeah.
18 to 23 throughout the stuff.
Read that, Romans.
Romans chapter 7 verse 22 reads, "For I delight in the law of the Most High after the inward man."
Listen, reading Romans 7 talks about that inward battle that we fight. And the New Testament really paints a proper picture about the inner battle. But the first thing that, in order to even start to deal with the inner man, there has to be a delight in the pursuit of breaking what's inside of you. You have to love it. You have to find happiness in breaking what's inside of you. Breaking the inner man, breaking that demon that's inside of you. If you don't find happiness in that pursuit, you're going to always discard it and focus on the superficial. I'm going to get more fringes, more fringed ass shirts. I'm going to get greens and purples and yellows. I'm going to be fringed the hell up. Headbands, I'm going to be saluting my tail off. I'm going to learn the Hebrew. I'm going to be Hebrew my ass off. Avagada hawaza chataya kalamana sa'aipa tazakwa rashata. I got the Hebrew. And I'm giving my mind to that. Instead of working on what's inside of you. The reality is this. Is it wicked to learn Hebrew? That's what a person is going to ask. Also, a war saying, it's wicked to do Hebrew. Am I saying that? What I'm saying is in a 24-hour cycle a day, where should you be giving your energy to? I'm saying what people do, they'll choose superficial Israelite things to focus on more than the real inner problem that's inside of you. This is what Paul was saying. Paul isn't teaching not to do the circumcision. He wasn't teaching not to follow the law. He's like, if you only have so much time in your day, why not focus on what's inside of the problem that's inside of you versus busy work? I'm going to learn all the ancient Hebrew and I'm going to read the Septuagint. Like, what are you doing in the Septuagint? The Greek version of the Bible. Just read the goddamn Bible. People have asked me that. You don't know the Bible, but I want to read Septuagint and I want to read all these outside books for what? You don't even know the Bible. Master the Bible. This is how Israel is wired. Because you know why? Because when you read outside books, you feel what? Smart.
He don't cut his
I
bait.
have wisdom.
He don't cut his bait.
I've read books.
Smarter.
I am smarter than the average man.
You got conversations started.
I've read books. Did you want to know about the book that I just read? You like to hear it? Here it goes. And I even start dropping about books, huh? Because it's not what's hot in the streets to work on your lust and your selfishness and your pride and your slothfulness. There's no glory in that. That's the point. So what Paul is teaching is what you're giving your mind to. Let's work on the accomplishments in breaking the inner man. And then when you have a hold of that beast that's inside of you, then start working on these outer things like Hebrew and all that other cool stuff. I've seen it with my own eyes for years. Israel wants to do all the outside stuff first. They want to collect all the books, they want to collect all the knowledge, but don't want to work on what's inside of them. It just is what it is. And that intellectual thinking is what Paul or Christ was attacking. So now, where's that verse in Corinthians?
It was 1 Corinthians 7:18 through 20.
Let me sit back here. Let me get 1 Corinthians 7, verse what?
18 through 20. And this is what we were going over in Acts 21, explaining Paul wasn't against the circumcision, but he was also letting them know you got to stay where you started at. If you were born in Jerusalem and you know the circumcision, then you're okay in that place. If you're in my congregation and I'm teaching you from scratch, then stay in your place.
Mm-hmm.
Stop trying to go and be after their understanding. You know, the Jews didn't have it together. So stop aspiring to be the Jew. If you're an Israelite, don't aspire to be the Gentile. Keep in your lane and keep abounding wherever you started at. That's why even Christ, when the lawyer asked Christ how to get to the kingdom of heaven, he said, follow the commandments. Okay, I've done that already. All right, then drop.
If you want more, then this is what you got to do to get more.
Done. Drop everything and follow me. If you already got the commandments, okay, then you can do more. Then go to the next step. But if the Gentile and you don't even got the bare bones of the commandments, then let's start there. Let's start there and then work up. Read that.
1 Corinthians chapter 7, verse 18. It says, is any man called being circumcised? Let him not become uncircumcised.
So this verse right here is proving that what was said in Acts was wrong. This is the understanding. Is any man called being circumcised? Let him not become uncircumcised. Focus on the path that you're at and perfect what you got going on with your circumcision. If you're born circumcised, cool. Then sit back here and add Christ to that concept. You don't have to sit back and be uncircumcised and renounce everything that you've been built in to get to Christ. Read on. But this is what ignorant people were doing. They thought that they were supposed to let go of what they were taught in the pursuit of Christ. Read on.
Is any called in uncircumcision? Let him not be circumcised.
So if you were called not to be circumcised, if you were called as a Gentile, then let's build on the path that Paul was building him on. Let's work on fixing you from the inside out. Why are you trying to do the same thing that the guy that was circumcised was going to get built in and how he was getting developed? You weren't. Your path was different than this person's path. Accept it.
And you know what it also shows? It's letting us know not to be envious of where we started at. Whereas the person that's coming in later in their life, the older man, and they're seeing these young men growing in the truth, they're born and raised in the truth, don't be envious of where he started at. Or for the man that was young, and he's all he knows the truth. He doesn't know the world. He doesn't know how it is to be in the mean streets or whatever. Don't be envious.
Don't be jealous of it.
Don't be jealous. Like, oh, you had freedom when you was young. I wish I could have did X, Y, and Z. No, be where you're at, embrace where you're at, and keep growing where you're at.
Okay.
Keep going.
Keep going. Verse 19.
Verse 19. Circumcision is nothing, and uncircumcision is nothing, but the keeping of the commandments of the Most High.
So Paul is still talking about keeping the commandments. It's not about following Christ. Stop. But it's not about if I was given the Torah, or if I came in not knowing who I am. Neither of that mattered. What mattered is what's inside of you and your willingness to change and follow the Most High, Christ. That's all that mattered. So Israel was getting caught up into all these labels and these ideologies, and they missed the big point. Just change. Just change what's inside of you. That's all that mattered. Let that verse go. Huh? Yeah, read that. Read verse 20. It's fine.
1 Corinthians chapter 7, verse 20. Let every man abide in the same calling wherein he was called.
Con. Stick to how Mosai started you off, and just take your time and work on what's inside you on your pace, at your pace and at your speed. Now we're going to sit back here and go into Romans chapter 2 and verse 25. We're going to probably go through the entire chapter. It looks like we have time. But I want to start off with verse 25 through 29, and then we'll jump into the rest of it. Romans 2 and 25.
God, Romans 2 and verse 25. For circumcision verily profiteth, if thou keep the law.
He says circumcision does profit if you what?
Keep the law.
We done?
But if thou be a breaker of the law, thy circumcision is made uncircumcision.
And how many of us who have committed the circumcision and follow the law, are we perfect in the law?
Nowhere near it.
Nowhere near it. So if we're not perfect in the law, then why is there pride in the circumcision?
I'm taking pride in something I've never mastered.
That's the point. And you're basing your entire belief system and your confidence in something that you never perfected in the first place.
Which is
it's as foolish and as immature. Like the circumcision would matter if you've never committed a sin. But since you've committed a sin, then why is your confidence on a law that you have never perfected? This is what Paul keeps saying. If you broke one law, you're guilty of it all. Does that mean not to follow the law? No. What he's saying is your confidence can't be based upon how perfect and how righteous you are because you follow the law. Your righteousness is not based on you following the law.
Because you haven't mastered it anyway.
That's the point. And this is what he's attacking. He's not attacking the law. He's attacking the thinking that we felt we were righteous because we followed the law. That's what you're going to read. Once we get to it, if we got time today, when you read in Acts 13, Paul was saying, listen, man, you're not justified by the law. Justified means you're not deemed righteous because you follow the law. That is what he's explaining in Romans and all these chapters. Okay?
Because you participate in the ceremonies and the information of the structure.
And you're 85% strong in the law?
Does not mean you're on point.
That's the point.
Everybody wants to say they're on point because they participate in the structure of Moses.
And there's
I'm down for the law 100%. But but why would you take pride and identity in something that you haven't even mastered in the first place? That doesn't make sense.
But we're going to keep going. So now we're at Romans 2 and continue.
Matthew 2 and verse 26. Therefore, if the uncircumcision keep the righteousness of the law, shall not his uncircumcision be counted for circumcision?
So if the uncircumcised loves his brother, loves his neighbor as himself, can understand how to have mercy and have discipline and self-control. If this guy was sitting back here and was committing wickedness with family members, because that's what he was raised in, and he learns to cut that off, and he ends to sit back here and cut off all this idolatry and ceremonies he was tapped into, wouldn't those sacrifices he's made count as righteousness just as much as all of your knowledge in the law and your inconsistencies in it count as uncircumcision? This is what he's saying. And what he's saying is, just because you've been in the knowledge for 10, 15 years, 20 years, that doesn't make you any better than the person that just came in 5 weeks ago. Because if the person that's been in for 5 weeks has been on point for 5 weeks, you know what, he's on point. And your 30 years of backsliding doesn't make you righteous. Doesn't make you righteous either. So you know, he's always showing us, all of us, we're all day to day. We're only as good as the last day we was operating serving the Most High. We're only as good as how we operate today. Yes, sis?
I apologize. I'm going to ask the question. I'm late. The uncircumcised would be who?
The uncircumcised is talking about the Israelites who didn't know who they were.
Okay.
We're still dealing with the time of Paul.
Okay.
And how all the hot water and the beatings he was going into, because he was commissioned to teach the Israelites who didn't know who they were. Okay? Let's continue.
God. Romans 2 and verse 27. And shall not uncircumcision, which is by nature, if it fulfill the law, judge thee, who by the letter in circumcision dost transgress the law?
Exactly. He's like, circumcision is natural. I mean, uncircumcision is natural. You're born into the world not circumcised. Read verse 27 again.
God. Romans 2 and verse 27. And shall not uncircumcision, which is by nature, if it fulfill the law.
He says, if this person is operating in order, and he's uncircumcised, and this person is changing what's inside of himself, isn't his actions going to judge the person who is circumcised and not following the law? Read on.
Judge thee, who by the letter and circumcision doth transgress the law?
Is that making sense to what I'm saying? He's like, the person who knows better and is not changing what's inside of him. Right. The person who doesn't know better, but he's changing what's inside of him, his righteousness and works is more respected by Christ than the person that knows better but isn't performing the works and not changing what's inside. You know how many Israelites know who they are and just are in ruts in their life and just don't change? You know how many of our people know right from wrong and just can't figure it out? And don't really have the know-how or the desire to change what's inside of them? He's like, just because you've been in for a period of time doesn't make you more righteous than a person that's actually changing. Now, you know what? This person that just came in might have a lot of things to change. He might have a lot of things to change, but if he's changing the many things he's got in him, that is counted more righteousness than a person who knows all this information but still ain't changing what's inside of him. Does that make sense? Okay.
People hate that clarification because it's clarifying where we're at. Now there's no hiding space.
Because there's a lot of
there's no book that can hide you.
There's no, and this is why the message that Paul is dropping and that Christ was dropping, he was really targeting the elites, the ones who knew better. He was targeting them. And the sinners, every sinner that went to Christ, what did Christ say? Just stop sinning. Follow the law. Get yourself cleaned up, and when you're ready for more, we'll take it further. Okay. Read on.
God,
you got something to say?
2. I had a verse. I can't find the verse.
Okay, what's the verse say?
It was just explaining how, and this isn't Ecclesiastes, but it was showing how if you're a wise man but you're a sinner, the person that was new, that was zealous, that followed the commandments was more valued or looked higher than the one that was wise and went back and regressed. I just can't find the specific wording to get the verse right now.
Okay.
Well, we can go into Job. Age should speak, years should speak.
It should.
But it's the spirit in the man.
Is it 11?
Age should teach wisdom.
Yep, let's keep going. And find it if you find it cool. Romans 2. Let's keep going.
Romans 2 and verse 28. For he is not a Jew, which is one outward.
So once again, the verse 28 and 29 kind of sums up the whole circumcision concept in a nutshell. 28 and 29 really explains what Paul meant when he was teaching about circumcision. Read verse 28.
Romans 2 and verse 28. For he is not a Jew, which is one outward.
This is what Christ was saying. Just because you have the outward adorning doesn't make you that Jew. Read on.
Neither is that circumcision, which is outward in the flesh.
The outward circumcision is lawful. You're supposed to have the outward circumcision. But that alone doesn't determine your righteousness. Once again, everything Christ and Paul is saying, they're never saying don't follow the law. They're just saying you can't hang your hat on the idea that all I got to do is follow the law and go through these outward procedures. When you sit back and read about what Paul says, Paul is really attacking the outward procedures. He didn't say anything about sinning and breaking the law and adultery and all that stuff. And you know that's wrong. But Israel had confidence and pride in the outward ceremonies, the outward procedures. And he's like, the outward procedures does not dictate righteousness.
Can I pause right here real quick? It's important. St. John 1:47. This is out of Christ's mouth. St. John 1:47 out of Christ's mouth.
47.
Yeah, and get the word guile 8:28.
Huh? Get the word what?
Guile.
Okay. So St. John 1:47.
God, St. John chapter 1 verse 47. Yahweh Shai saw Nathanael.
So this is Christ. He's great in this man. Read.
Coming to him.
He saw Nathanael coming to him.
And said of him, Behold, an Israelite indeed.
He said, look. Behold means to look, to take note. Or what?
An Israelite indeed.
An Israelite indeed. Meaning this man is truly an Israelite. And what does Christ use to quantify if a man is truly an Israelite?
In whom is no guile.
In whom is no what?
Guile.
Guile. 8:28. Craft, cunning, artifice, duplicity, deceit. So what's the connection? Duplicity. The Pharisaic and the Sadducee community on the outside presented one way, but within they were a different way. That's duplicity. That's a double nature. I present well, but not the true person. Right? Then there's craft, meaning what? Craft, I'm good at you not seeing my sins, doesn't mean I don't sin. I'm just good at not presenting my sin. That's craft. What else? Deceit. What's the deceit? I say I'm sincerely about this, I profess to be about this, but my life and actions don't dictate I'm really about this. That's guile. So Christ said, Behold Nathanael, an Israelite what? Indeed. Why? That deceitful nature wasn't there. That duplicity wasn't there. That craft wasn't there. And that cunning nature wasn't there. I'm just being smart, but I'm really an asshole. And I really have a negative way of looking at you. And I know how to manipulate your work. I can articulate better than you, so I can debate you better.
Yep.
Because you can't even use your tongue against me, because you can't speak against me. Because I'm a sharp lawyer. I'm trained in argument. I'm trained in debate. You can't argue. You can be right and still lose the argument.
Yep.
That's what was happening in this class warfare amongst our people.
Wow.
So he's saying, listen, this man Nathanael, this man's a real Jew. He's not deceitful. He's not duplicitous. He's not cunning, and he has no craft. And Nathanael had money. He had bread. He had bread. When you read about it, he took Christ in his house. But he wasn't sitting here playing that money game. He wasn't playing the lawyer game. He wasn't playing the smart guy education game. He's just being a real dude, a real guy about his people.
And all Christ was trying to show in Paul is that whether you're intelligent or sharp or elite, you have to stay humble too. And you might have the power to use your words and your intelligence to get over on people, but the Most High in Christ sees you.
Yeah.
And the person who's lacking, you got to work on you too. Nobody escapes the challenges and the responsibility to be on point.
Nobody's skipping change.
Nobody can skip change. But the Pharisees were skipping it by the eyes of men because they were always in that circle of other elites looking after them. What you was gonna pull?
No, Kariah found it. It was Ecclesiastes 19 and 24. You know, because this is why, you know, even when you read in Romans 11, it talks about how the righteousness that Israel aspired for, they cannot attain, but the Gentiles found it. And what it was explaining is the simplicity and the faith that the Gentiles had surpass what the Israelites who were born and
In
raised in
knowledge
Israel
and
had.
skill and
Knowledge, skill,
years.
understanding, books that they read. The Gentiles had surpassed them in faith and fear of the Most High. Because that was the one thing that we never had in Israel. We never had the fear. Read that. Ecclesiastes 19:24. And what's crazy about this is it just proves that the prophets in the past also understood this concept. Read that.
Ecclesiastes chapter 19, verse 24. He that hath small understanding and feareth the Most High.
So if I didn't grow up in the truth and I wasn't hearing the Bible every day, would I not grow up with small understanding? Or when I'm getting taught the word now, my understanding of God is small. But if I fear the Most High and I lock into what I'm being taught, read.
Is better than one that hath much wisdom.
This is the contrast. You're better, and you're looked at as more like in John.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to be the judge. You're more superior in virtue and spirit. If you have fear versus the one who grew up in the truth, has the wisdom, read.
Much wisdom and transgresseth the law.
But falls short in the law. But falls short in loving his brother. Although you follow the exterior, and this is why when you read in Isaiah 1, Most High hated the solemn assemblies. He hated the new moons. He hated the feast days. Because although we did the exterior, we looked the part, we had the beautiful garments on, we were evil in our mindset. He said, if you have a small understanding, but you have much faith and much fear, you're going to be superior. You're going to look at as more spiritual and virtuous than the person who grew up and has all the wisdom in the world, but can't follow the law. Can't follow the weightier matters in the law. I don't know if you can go into that Matthew 23.
I was going to go on. You finished that verse?
Yeah.
Read verse 25.
Come on, read on.
Matter of fact, let me just kind of extend it out, because this verse, the extension of it kind of talks about that Pharisaic mindset.
Yeah.
Read that.
And transgresseth the law of the Most High.
Come.
Verse 25. There is an exquisite subtlety.
There is an exquisite subtlety for people that are in elite positions and are learned and are sharp, good with their words, good with their communication, good with their books and their reading and their knowledge. The ones that can, there's certain people that can create exquisite subtleties that can fool people.
They're cunning and
That
crafty.
can, that there's cunning words, cunning approaches that could fool other people. They can run circles around people with their intelligence and their subtlety of speech. This is what these Pharisees were. And this is why Christ was cutting them to the heart. And they were trying to kill Christ. There was times Christ was cutting these Pharisees and he'd slide through the back door before they were able to organize a gang to kill him. It was the same concept, because he was the only one that could peep their game and cut them for what they were and see them for who they really were. So read verse 25 again.
God. There is an exquisite subtlety, and the same is unjust.
That exquisite subtlety is unjust because people can manipulate other people with their words and with their lies. And they can paint pictures to where people can think a person's telling the truth, but really behind it all is still a lie, and it is smoke and mirrors. And the Pharisees operated with these smoke and mirror concepts all the time. Read on.
And there is one that turneth aside to make judgment appear.
There's a person that turns aside to make judgment appear, but they're turning aside from what? The principles of right and wrong. Read on.
And there is a wise man that justifieth in judgment.
There's a wise man that's justified in judgment, and a lot of times they're not going to see, because they're so focused on watching that exquisite liar that judgment a lot of times isn't imputed in the right place. Is that?
So the turning aside to make judgment appear? You said that was what?
Read. You're talking about the second line, right?
Yeah.
There is one that turneth aside to make judgment appear through their what?
Subtlety.
Through their subtlety.
Right. Okay.
Through their subtle words and their exquisite communication, they can manufacture a false judgment. But then there's righteous people that are trying to do right, that are going to look upon like they're the bad guy, like they're the wicked guy.
Right.
Is that?
So that's gaslighting, right?
Yeah.
That's a form of it, yeah. But what he's showing you is education, communication skills. They were able to sit back here and gain the people's favor. The Pharisees were able to gain the people's favor by their communication skills and how they presented
Like
themselves.
it say, it's political. It's political manipulation of people.
I can make you see what I
It's
want you to see.
propaganda, political manipulation of people, and knowing how to act, being an actor.
Yes.
That's what an actor is. A play actor is a hypocrite.
But you're a hypocrite, but you're a skillful hypocrite.
Yeah, good at that.
You're subtle. Your words and how you operate and how you present yourself, it's hard to pick. It's hard to read you out.
I mean, I can never catch you slipping.
I can't catch you. Your words are on point. It's like trying to catch Joel Osteen. You know he's full of crap. He's like this. He's teasing. He's smiling. I love the Lord. I've got money. We have a mega church. I'm smiling. Look at my wife. You know, that's what this guy, but you know he's like, I know he's doing different. I can't
You can
prove
see
it.
in his eyes, Zach.
You know it.
You can't put
but
nothing
you
on.
can't prove
Until
it.
the storm.
No scandal.
Until the storm of Houston. When
Yeah,
they closed the doors, like, oh, we don't hear about the help. We about the help life. Must have to pull his card out.
Yep.
Must have to pull his card.
Yeah.
Oh, you ain't really about that.
Yeah.
We didn't have the facility. You gotta make a church.
You got a stadium.
Crowd pleaser.
Yeah, you got a stadium.
He's a master manipulator using speech. A master manipulator using presentation and image.
That's the point.
Just
But this
like-
was our people was into that.
Just like MLK.
Yeah.
Listen, you can't tell people talk bad about MLK
Don't
back in
you
the day.
dare talk
back
about
in the
Dr.
80s and 90s.
MLK.
If you
Not
were,
Martin Luther the King, Dr. Martin Luther the
brother,
King.
you get Judas want to kill you and stab you if you talk about MLK
I know.
back in the day, bro.
I know.
Well, don't you know we wouldn't be able to drink from the water fountain? What's the MLK? Oh, come on, bro. You know this dude was a globalist, dog?
Yeah. Kinda.
With them boys, man? You know what's going on with this guy? Oh, you're just a hater. You're just a hater. You're in that cult. You're in the cult. So,
That's funny.
but they don't have the background. They don't have the background to break the information down. So you can't teach them nothing. You just gotta argue with them. And then after you get tired of arguing, like, no problem. Go get your march on, bro. What's cool? Get bit by dogs if you want.
But once again, we're just showing you that these people that are communicators and they're subtle with their communication, they can wrest judgment, they can sway judgment the way they want it based off their presentation and their status.
Yeah.
And a lot of people can get done wrong because of how they can manipulate judgment and manipulate judgment by the views of how people look at
Turn
it.
aside.
Yes.
And they can justify what they're doing when someone tries to correct them. And
Exactly.
That's-
They can just spin things with their leverage, with the image that they've already built. They're Teflon. So Christ coming out here shredding these dudes.
And they got social status, so you really can't argue with that.
But Christ is coming out here healing people. He's physically healing people. And like, dang, this guy's making us look bad.
He's speaking against us, and they're saying the Most High is not with him. Why the Most High grant miracles?
That's the point.
They try to say, no, he has a devil. He has a devil that makes him do good things.
God.
Like, it doesn't make sense.
But that was the whole thing. This was the movement. But what you gonna say?
I wanted to-
I want to go back to this chapter, but keep going.
I just wanted to prove that point. You know how this is the Pharisaical mindset. It was Matthew 23 and verse 23. Matthew 23 and verse 23. Because even when you look at what Christ was teaching, not only were they able to wrest judgment and sway judgment with the way they wanted to do it, they also had their commandments of men, their doctrines of men. Their ways of operating that were aside from the law. So if we've established a society based off of my own version of what's right and wrong, then you can always sway the righteous and wickedness, because it wasn't even based off fully the law. Read that, Matthew 23 and verse 23.
Matthew 23 and 23. Woe unto you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites! For ye pay tithe of mint and anise and cumin, and have omitted the weightier matters of the law.
And this was the point. The whole chapter is explaining how you guys look the part, you play the part.
If all the incense is flowing, incense is smelling
great
awesome.
in
Yes.
the temple. The temple smells great. You smell great. You know what I'm saying? The babies are smiling. But you've omitted the weightier, the heavier matters of the law, the most important parts of the law.
Change, love, sacrifice,
Yeah.
going out there and dealing with these sinners.
But you got to circumcise yourself.
Yeah.
You got to cut your flesh if
Yeah.
you want to make it. That wasn't the heaviest matter in the law. You know?
And have omitted the weightier matters of the law, judgment.
So judgment, you guys sway in judgment, rest in judgment. You're subtle, like you were saying here. You're exquisite. Your exquisite subtlety. You're sneaky, you're sly, you're cunning to get what you want, to get the outlook and the perspective of the people that you want. Read.
Mercy.
You have zero mercy. You don't understand the law of mercy. Read.
And faith.
And you completely lack faith in Christ. Because you just did things by the book to make yourself look like you were on point. But it was deeper than that. You justified yourself as a law for, as being perfect in the law. And I'm going to make because I'm perfect in the law. But you were never perfect in the law. And that's why Romans 2 is saying, if that's what you boast about, if that's what you have your confidence in, you're not going to make it. Because again, the heaviest points in the law, the most important aspects of the law, you didn't follow. And you didn't teach.
You didn't value it.
You didn't value it. Read.
These ought ye to have done, and not to leave the other undone.
So this is important. I'm going to cut you off. So this is important. When Elisha is pushing, he's showing you what is the argument and what is the political background and what is the spirit of the time period. We're in our time period right now. We're in our time period, the age of information, cell phones, social media. People might not get us a couple thousand years from now. Oh, what are you talking about social media? What are you talking about? What do you mean by that? When the whole world's blown up, ain't no more Apple phones. Ain't gonna talk about no social media. But it's a different time period. So this is great that we're going back as if it's a time machine and getting the real understanding.
Yeah.
What were they dealing with? Like we're going into.
Yeah. No, because you know what? This is how the society was built up.
But you got to go back into that verse 23, where it says, the weightier matters what you were supposed to be focusing on, and not to leave the other undone. Meaning, focus on the weightier matters and not the light matters. This is what he was saying that the Pharisees were supposed to operate in. Deal with the things that matter most. This is what Paul was teaching. The things that matter most. Loving your brother. Fighting what's inside of you. Working on that inner man mattered more than the outer presentation. The outer representation of righteousness was less important than working on the inner aspect of righteousness. This was the message Paul was teaching. It went over their heads. It was inflammatory. They wanted to kill him. It was so bad, and they didn't understand it. They thought he needed death. But Christ was teaching the same thing, and they wanted him dead. And they kept saying, they both were looked upon as if they were trying to say the law is not necessary or important. And neither of them said that.
You know, why would Christ have to even say, I have not come to do away with the law?
Because they were saying that he was saying to do away with the law.
That's the point.
And he's explaining this. It's not about this. It's about fixing what's inside of you on top of whatever outside ceremony you might be doing. Anyway, I know we're beating a dead horse, but the horse needs to get beat today. Let's go back to Ecclesiasticus 19 and 26.
Ecclesiasticus chapter 19, verse 26. There is a wicked man that hangeth down his head sadly, but inwardly he is full of deceit.
It's still that duplicitous person who outwardly is subtle, outwardly is polished, but inwardly is wicked, inwardly is full of deceit. And this is what Christ and Paul were trying to eliminate in the nation. Read on.
Casting down his countenance and making as if he heard not.
If I didn't understand. People know how to sit back and act like they didn't know anything. They didn't mean to do something, but really they did mean to do something. People know how to feign humility. People know how to feign sadness and feign regret. We see it every day. But Mosiah is showing you this is the nature of a lot of the elite of our nation. And Christ's presence, that's why I think it was you, or I don't know if you were Elisha. No, it was you, where it says this person has no God in them.
Yeah.
This person doesn't have all this fluff in him. This person is a real true brother. He's a real true brother because he's not giving you what he thinks you want from him. That's why we attack so much in class and online about that duplicit person. Because you can't build with a person in leadership that gives you whatever you want me to give you.
I'll just give you what you want to see to make you happy.
We can't deal with people like that in this position.
It says guile. To disguise craftily. It's that chameleon type vibration.
You can't be that way when it comes to righteousness. Yeah. You can't play games with this working with people's lives like this.
Be black and white when it comes to that.
You have to be, or the Most High is not going to honor you long term. Okay, read on.
Where he is not known, he will do thee a mischief before thou be aware.
And that's the point. Where he's not known, where he can take advantage of your ignorance, he'll take advantage of it.
You can't see him because he's too sharp.
And that's the
He's
point.
too slippery. He's too sneaky.
He knows who to be and how to be and where he can get away with negative. But once again, this is what the Pharisees and how they were operating. I can do the dirt that I can do around these certain people, and they'll never know it.
Skillful manipulation by present righteousness, because I'm an authority figure with the law.
And this is why Christ and Paul kept dealing with the conscience of a person.
Yeah.
And
But they
how
don't
the
hear that.
conscience of a person is more valuable, and that's what deems a person righteous.
I can hide
is his
behind
heart and
ceremony.
his consciousness versus status, the people liking me, the people voting me in, titles,
long fringes,
ranks.
praying in the supermarkets in front of everybody.
Yes.
Giving people the religious show.
Fasting
Israel
out
loves
in front of everybody.
Israel loves the religious show.
Yep.
Even when I was Jacob, just love it. Because other people love to see it. But Christ is judging the true person.
Yeah. Keep going. This chapter is dealing with Pharisaic mindsets. Read on.
Verse 28. And if for want of power he be hindered from sinning.
So listen, I'm only going to not do dirt because I got to maintain my look. So when I get power, then I can do the dirt.
There you go.
This is the thinking of the Pharisees. Read verse 28 again.
And if for want of power he be hindered from sinning.
And if for want of power he's hindered from sinning.
It's not
I got to
practical.
play the game.
Yeah, there you go.
I got to play the game right now, so I can't show my ass. So let me be the politician and kiss babies and doubt brothers up.
The guy you want to see.
Where I'm gonna blow the hell out of the horn and I'm gonna be the Shabbat guy until I get to where I want to be. Then I can get comfortable and really flex on what the power that I want.
They see the camp, the whole spirit of the camp and the camp trajectory and the wording and the angles and how men roll. All of a sudden starts changing the whole spirit of being a Jew.
This is politics. And this was the political realm that was happening amongst the Israelite Pharisaic community. And this is what Christ was attacking when he was dealing with the Pharisees. He knew that they were playing a game to get power.
Mm-hmm.
And that power was what they wanted. Righteousness didn't matter as much as power mattered. So in order to get the power, I had to tell these people what they wanted to hear with the exquisite subtlety to get what I wanted. Read on.
Yet when he findeth opportunity, he will do evil.
When he gets the opportunity and when eyes are off of him, then he'll get loose. Then he'll push for his position.
When he has opportunity, I got to pull this one scripture right here. St. John 19 and verse 15. St. John 19 and verse 15.
You said St. John what, sir?
19 and 15.
19 and 15.
St. John chapter 19, verse 15 reads, But they cried out, Away with him, away with him, crucify him. Pilate saith unto them, Shall I crucify your king?
He said, shall I crucify your king, right? Read.
The chief priests answered, We have no king but Caesar.
Oh, the Most High is the king of? You're not about
Christ is the
listen.
king. You mean Christ is the king?
Well, Christ. They didn't accept Christ as king anyway. But you're saying we have no king but Caesar. You're playing politics. Caesar is a president of Rome. No, we don't have any king. The only king we have is you, Caesar. That's them playing politics. That's a power play. That's brown nosing to get closer to the Roman government. It wasn't about righteousness. Read one verse up. It was the Passover. Read verse 14.
And it was the preparation of the Passover, and about the 6th hour. And he saith unto the Jews, Behold, your king.
If it's the Passover, you must be focused on Passover, bro. Who's talking about murder on the Passover?
Jews.
Who's putting their brother to law on the Passover? You can't wait till Passover's over with and then we can discuss this with Christ? Or have a conversation or get some understanding? You're trying to set up murder plots by using and leveraging the law system, which is the government political law system against our Savior. Showing that they're not really about scripture, law, and order. They're about using political leverage to get rid of political adversaries.
And once again, we're going into this to show who Christ was attacking when he was bringing out the message.
Yeah.
Who he was focusing the message on. This is what we're dealing with. Whether it's Christ talking to the Pharisees or Paul's spats with these Israelites that were still heavy Torah only, that didn't have an understanding of what the message was about.
God.
Whether it's talking about Christ, whether Paul, it's still the message that the inward part has to be fixed, more than focusing on the outward parts. That's what the concept of the circumcision versus the uncircumcision was. It wasn't about the fact that the circumcision was a wicked thing, but it was the fact that people will be circumcised and be content into the stopping of the pursuit of change. You have to understand, when you become an Israelite, whether you didn't know anything about who you were or if you knew the law, we forgot or didn't understand that this evolution was until Christ came back, or the evolution was until you died. What was happening in the Hebrew community is our inclination and our motivation to change stopped once we knew the law. And Paul was teaching, listen, man, just knowing the law is not enough. There's more pursuits and there's more levels and layers to understanding the Most High in Christ than just this law. And that was the contention. And people looked at that message and said, man, you're just saying we're not supposed to follow the law of Moses. Whereas Paul was saying, listen, you're supposed to do more than just the law of Moses. That was the understanding. Doing more. Not eradicating the concept. It's not about doing away with the old. It's just now you understand the old. Now can I ascend and add on top of the original foundation of what Moses was teaching. Now we understand Christ. Now we understand Paul. Can we stack the message on top? Okay, you guys have more?
No.
Okay, let all those verses go. And now let's go back.
Romans 2.
We're going to go to Romans 2. We might as well just knock out Romans 2. Let's start from the top. Romans chapter 2, verse 1 to 24. And we'll stop at that today. I don't think we'll have more time than that. Should barely get to this. Romans chapter 2. Don't forget, when we read about judges is about looking at people in the worst light. Okay, so keep that in mind when we're just looking at how
seeing the worst in people.
Seeing the worst in people. So that's the concept that we're dealing with in Romans, the beginning of Romans 2. So read that. Romans chapter 2, verse 1.
Romans chapter 2, verse 1. Therefore thou art inexcusable of man.
O man,
Slaki. Whosoever thou art that judgeth.
So he's talking to the person that's in position of leadership. The person that's judging is the person that's in leadership. The message is always dealing with how leaders handle power, how leaders distributed judgment, how leaders looked at the weak and the sick and the incapable. It is you have no excuse. The Israelites and the Hebrews that are in position of authority. Read on.
For wherein thou judgest another, thou condemnest thyself.
So when you sit back here and you're able to scrutinize the smallest little weaknesses and flaws in your brothers, he says you're condemning yourself, because the Most High is going to sit back here and look at the littlest of your flaws and issues and judge you based off what you can't do. Because just because you're the smart guy and you can run circles around the guy that's in front of you that can't figure it out, doesn't mean the Most High can't see what you're weak at and what you're hiding in front of that weaker person. He still sees what you can't do behind closed doors. And that's what is supposed to keep everybody in check. It goes back on Friday's Cup's class about the leaders being humble. If you lose the ability to be humble, you'll look at yourself like you ain't got nothing wrong with you. Like you're infallible. Like we're the three holiest guys on earth. Are you serious, bro? To say that?
Like your righteousness isn't as filthy rags.
Wow. Like what do you do when you're at the whatever hell last name that you got in residence? So you're on point. You're just super spiritual. You're just on point. You ain't doing nothing wrong. On earth, 3 greatest men on earth to even listen. For somebody to tell that to you and you don't check them immediately is your wickedness and your pride. Because what they'll say is, "Well, I didn't say it." But when they're saying it, you're doing this.
You're feeding that. Bro.
You love it. You love that inside. You're like, yeah.
But
Keep
Christ,
talking about how
but if I
right.
was really following Christ, Christ made himself man
Of no reputation.
No reputation. Huh?
Well, this is the point. I have to. Even if I know how to maintain A through W. If you're honest and you're humble, you'll know there's things in you that you're weak in. And there's enough crap to fix to not get inflated about what you've accomplished already. So what Paul is saying is, listen, bro, how easily you can see and dissect a man's flaws. You better sit back here and be focusing on that same way with you. Or the Most High you're condemning yourself because of how one-sided you are about other people's sickness. When people come in the truth, they're going to be flooded with weaknesses. But now because they're flooded with weaknesses, I'm going to look down on them because I don't have as many flaws as they got.
Or it's not apparent.
You know how heavy that is in Israel? That's how Israel is now. I've been in X amount of years. I don't go through those weak issues no more. Israel is simple and weak. Well, what about your 25-year-old demons you ain't been able to get over with yet? You got 30-year demons in you. You just don't talk about it. And you know how to hide it so people can't see it. It's the same thing that the Pharisees were doing in Ecclesiasticus 19. It's the exact same wickedness. So Paul is sitting back here saying the Most High is going to condemn you for how you look at people, how lowly you look at people, and how disgusted you are at Israel's sicknesses. Because you'll be surprised how disgusted Israel is in dealing with other people's sickness. That's a real thing in our people. Hatred and disgust because of how weak and behind other people's are. It happens all the time. Read on.
For thou that judgest doest the same thing.
And that's what Paul is saying. It's just in an arena where people can't see it. The sick people is an easy call out. You just hide your crap so nobody can see it. You're not in the same. Your dirt is at night where everybody's dirt is in the daytime. It's behind closed doors. Nobody can see my wickedness. So I'm going to present like I'm righteous and holier than the guy that makes mistakes in front of everybody. Read on.
Come. But we are sure that the judgment of the Most High is according to truth against them which commit such things.
So he says judgment of the Most High is going to come to people who operate like that. Read on.
And thinkest thou this, O man, that judgest them which do such things, and doest the same, that thou shalt escape the judgment of the Most High?
Do you think you can sit back here and look down on people and look and can dissect their flaws with a fine-tooth comb and be disgusted at them because of it and not think the Most High is going to do the same thing to you? However you judge your brother who's weak is going to be how the Most High judges you. If you can't find mercy and patience in developing somebody, you think the Most High is going to have mercy and patience in developing you? He was trying to break down and destroy that elitist, selfish, smug attitude that our people got with each other.
It's a cancer, bro.
It is a cancer. Read on.
Or despisest thou the riches of his goodness and forbearance and long suffering?
Listen, he says, do the Pharisees and the elites despise the riches of the Most High's goodness and forbearance and long suffering? What we don't understand is that there is a power in how the Most High forbears our wickedness. The Most High forbears our sickness, our weakness, our selfishness, our pride, all of our issues. He forbears it with long suffering. And he says there's riches in that. There is power. There is godly power in how long you can be patient with somebody. There is godly power in how long you can forbear somebody's sickness and still have hope and see the good in them. That has way more measuring power than any superficial talent. He like true judges, a true judge can see the value in forbearing and being patient with somebody and having the ability to suffer through somebody's issues for as long as they need to figure it out. There is power in that. There is greatness in that. But that's not taught enough. What's taught is, why is it taking you so long to catch up? Jake is sick. Jake is crazy. Jake don't want to change. Well, if you want to say Jake don't want to change, you don't want to wait. How about that? And you're going to be judged on the fact that you don't want to wait. Just like you think the most they're going to judge them because they don't want to change, you're going to get judged because you don't want to wait. For all those years you've been in, you should have learned some waiting skills. Versus being angry and disgusted and I just want to snap at people because they haven't gotten to where I expect them to be on my timetable. Yes, sir?
Kyle Cobb had put the fellowship definition, and there was partnership, joint interest of fellowship in pain.
Listen, I have to be all in with how much suffering is going to take to rehabilitate somebody. People think rehabilitation is strictly a one-sided thing. I gave you the scriptures. I gave you the breakdowns, right? Figure it out. No. Development and rehabilitation is teaching. There's accountability on their end, and there's accountability on our side to keep finding different ways and strategies to get you to see what you need and how you need to see it to change in what's inside of you. The verse is going to explain it. Read verse 4 again.
God, Romans 2 verse 4. Or despisest thou the riches of his goodness and forbearance and longsuffering, not knowing that the goodness of the Most High leadeth thee to repentance?
The goodness of the Most High leads a person to repentance. If you want people to change, how committed are you to forbearing their weaknesses? How committed are you to suffering as long as you need for them to see the repentance necessary? What it's telling you is, if they're going to change, everybody complains about why it takes so long for somebody to change, why it takes so long for somebody to get over the hump and fix what's inside of them. The question is, what you don't understand is to get people to repent is a two-way street. To get people to rehabilitate and change is also predicated on your patience, your mercy, your long suffering. How long are you willing to teach, reteach, redirect, stay calm, stay under control, not take people personal? He's attacking that judgmental nature on our people that want to quit on Israel, that wants to look down on Israel, that wants to sit back and say, see, I knew this nigga didn't want to change. Let me go to the next person. Let me go to the next person. Israel constantly is jumping to the next person for the next fix. You know, it's easy to sit back and get a person to class, but can you keep them there? Can you do what it takes to work through issues with people, through their highs and lows, until they finally get it? So he's saying this power and the riches of goodness and forbearance and long suffering is what leads people to repentance. He's like, so everything these Pharisees were about was never going to help rehabilitate anyone. This is why Christ had to show up. Paul had to show up to show what it takes to attain true rehabilitation. You got to give up your life. The leader has to give up his life to make sure that somebody else is rehabilitated. That's what it takes. For everybody who's anti-camp, you're not going to realize that you can't develop somebody and rehabilitate them unless you're with them long enough time which is in a camp. Do you think rehabilitation works if you see a person twice a week for 4 hours a week? You're kidding yourself if you think that's what it takes to have true rehabilitation. How many hours of counseling it takes to keep marriages together? How many hours of counseling it takes to even understand a person's problems enough to even start working on the problems? It takes hour after hour of invested time to even understand a person enough to give them counsel. You can't have this judgmental, condescending attitude towards the sick if you want to actually rehabilitate them. And this is what Paul is explaining. Read on.
God. But after thy hardness and impenitent heart.
Didn't the Most High keep talking about Israel's hard heart in Jeremiah and in Ezekiel? Israel's been had that hard, that hard heart, that stiff-necked heart, that uncircumcised heart. He's like, that stiff-necked, uncircumcised, hard heart is what's inside of you and is what's keeping you from developing your people. Read on.
But after thy hardness and impenitent heart treasurest up unto thyself wrath against the day of wrath.
He says all of that negative and that lack of willingness to change and come out of yourself is building up a justification that at the day of wrath, you ain't gonna make it. The day of wrath is the end times. So all that stubbornness and that lack of understanding and that lack of willingness to put yourself in somebody else's shoes, to go the extra mile to rehabilitate your brother, is going to be why you don't make it. And this is why he keeps talking about how the outside doesn't matter. The circumcision doesn't matter if you don't have enough love to deal with your brother with his long-suffering issues, to help rehabilitate him. What good is all the fringes if you don't love your brother? And if you don't want to inconvenience your life so that he can grow. Does this make sense? Read on.
And revelation of the righteous judgment of the Most High.
When it's time for righteous judgment, all that hard-heartedness and selfishness and your lack of willingness to condescend to men of low estate
will be remembered.
Because that's going to be what factors into you getting into the kingdom. So what good is all that show? Remember, and Christ talked about it. How that guy sat back here and prayed like, thank God I'm not a sinner. Thank goodness I'm not a wicked person like this guy. I pay tithes. I do all this good stuff. I'm righteous as hell. Yeah. And the other person just couldn't even look up to the sky, knowing he was a sinner. You're like, which prayer is going to be accepted? The person that knows they're a mess up and is willing. If I know I'm a mess up, I'm willing to follow instruction. This person who's a know-it-all can't be adjusted, can't be humbled. So all that outward confidence solves nothing, and it means nothing when it comes to salvation. Read on. This is what circumcision versus uncircumcision is about. It's the mentality that we have, the pride, the arrogance of our position is what he's attacking, not the literal law itself. Read on.
God, who will render to every man according to his deeds.
But what deeds is it? Is it deeds of the law or is it deeds of consciousness towards your people? We're getting judged based off our consciousness and our outlook towards the people we work with every day. Read on. What's that?
Can I post something?
What you got?
Wisdom Solomon 12.
Just pull it.
Go to Wisdom Solomon 12 and verse 18 through 19. Just on that point, because we got to understand the Most High. We read 2 Ezra 7. He had to continue abounding in His mercies. Just so
verse what?
It's Wisdom Solomon 12 and 18 through 19.
Okay.
He had to continue to multiply His mercies, because if He didn't, the world wouldn't even continue. So what it shows is the Most High was a master. He was master at being merciful. Read that. Wisdom of Solomon 12 and 18 through 19.
Wisdom of Solomon, chapter 12, verse 18. It says, but thou, mastering thy power, judges with iniquity. Equity. Judges with equity.
He does not judge with iniquity.
Come on, man.
Most High judges with them. That's bad.
God. The Father?
God.
Judgment. No, it says
Read that from the top, man.
Let's miss Psalm chapter 12, verse 18.
That was evil.
But thou, mastering thy power, judges with equity.
So the Most High judges fairly. We just read earlier. He's judging you based off of where you started. He's judging you based off of your information. When you read Acts 17 and 30, he winks at your ignorance. So your judgment is based off of what you know and how well you're executed. Read it.
It says, and orderest us with great favor.
And this also proves that the Most High has a specific and a particular love for our people. He doesn't judge the rest of the nations the same way he judges us. You can read about that in 1 Maccabees 6, even later in the verse. It explains that he'll let the nations continue to do wickedness and corrupt themselves until they get to a certain point, and then he'll wipe them out. With us, if you make a mistake, you sin, you're getting stung immediately. He doesn't want us to continue to bound in sin to where he has to let us go completely. So he judges us fairly, and he judges us with great favor. Read.
It says, for thou mayest use power when thou wilt.
He has the power to correct, to judge, to admonish whenever he wills, to chastise whenever he wills. But seeing all this, understanding the mind and the works of the Most High. Read.
It says, verse 19, but by such works hast thou taught thy people that the just man.
So it says, by such works, seeing the works of the Most High, seeing his mercies, how he operates with us as an entire people, it says this is supposed to teach us, read,
that the just man should be merciful.
So if you want to be just before the Most High, you had to be merciful. You had to understand there's times when you have to abound in your mercy. We have to understand where this man's coming from. He may not catch on as quick as you. He may be deficient in areas. He may be irritated. This is why Galatians 6:1 said, if you're spiritual, ye which are spiritual will restore them in the spirit of meekness, considering thyself. If you're spiritual, if you're just, you're supposed to have these mercies. You're supposed to be able to be considerate and understand where this man is coming from, where he's at in the spirit right now. He may not be where you're at, but you're not perfect either. So why am I looking down on him? Read on.
It says, and hast made thy children to be of a good hope, that thou givest repentance for sins.
So if we understand the Most High gives us repentance for sins, if we understand like Ezra 9 and 13 says, he stings us less than what we deserve, why can't we do the same thing with our own people? Why are we rolling as hard as we possibly can, give them the maximum judgment, the maximum shame for their mistakes, when the Most High doesn't do that with us? This is the mindset the Pharisees had that Christ was against, that Paul was against. That's all I'm on.
Let's go back to Romans 2 and 7 now.
Come. Romans 2 and verse 7. To them who by patient continuance in well-doing seek for glory and honor and immortality.
Immortality, read on.
Eternal life.
Immortality and eternal life, glory and honor, go to them who by patient continuance in well-doing seeks glory. You get the kingdom by how long you can continue in well-doing. That concept right there kind of attacks that all I have to do is follow the law type situation. It's continual well-doing. It's not just I know the law and I know the Torah. It's more, it goes beyond that. It is continual good works that determine your entry and your entrance into the kingdom. Read on.
God, but unto them that are contentious and do not obey the truth, but obey unrighteousness, indignation, and wrath.
All these things he's pointing on: indignation, wrath, unrighteousness. These are internal issues. To be contentious in the mind. Who am I contentious toward? My people. It ain't the Romans. It's being contentious towards our people, contentious towards the sick, or contentious towards people revealing the weakness in you. This is what our people were dealing with. It was the fact that I didn't want to deal with the sick, and I didn't want to deal with nobody exposing me for who I really am and pointing out my weaknesses. Read on.
Tribulation and anguish upon every soul that doeth evil.
So tribulation and anguish upon every soul, read on,
that doeth evil, of the Jew first, and also of the Gentiles.
So listen, the person who knows better or the person who's just learning. Nobody has the free courses to be wicked. Read on.
But glory, honor, and peace to every man that worketh good, to the Jew first, and also to the Gentile.
Now I gotta take a kind of a left turn on this statement, because this sounds churchy as hell to me, man. When you sit back and read to the Jew first and also the Gentile, it'll make you think he's talking about some white folks out here.
Everybody.
So what I want to do, I didn't switch it over. But what I'm going to do is when you sit back here and you go to the Blue Letter Bible and you look up the word Gentile in verse 9 and in verse 10, what you'll find is the word Helene. Matter of fact, let me get it. I'm gonna find it. Let me do verse 9. I'm gonna find it and I'm gonna play it so people can hear. I got it. It was
Strong's G 1672 Helene.
So when it said the Jew first and also the Gentile, really the Gentile was talking about the Greek. That Gentile in verse 9 and verse 10, verse 9 and 10 was talking about, it says, Helene, a Greek either by nationality, whether a native of the mainland or a Greek of the Greek islands or colonies. It wasn't talking about Gentile, it was talking about a Greek. And you're going to read a lot of times when you read a Gentile in these chapters, it was talking about Greeks. Now there is a method to where I'm going into this. I want to make sure I take my time and explain. I want to go into this because we're not going to have time to finish all this. I'm going to finish this part. No, I don't want that. I got something for you. So what we're going to do, we're going to hold this and quickly jump to 1 Maccabees chapter 12 verse 20 through 22. Damn it, I keep messing up on this. Verse 12, chapter 12, verse 20 through 22, right? I want to make sure we understand as we're going into this Greeks. Let me see. I'm gonna make sure. Give me a second. That's
Maccabees, right?
It's
First
Maccabees, chapter 12, verse 20 through 22.
Okay.
This is important to explain because we're going to keep hearing about Gentile, which is really talking about the Greeks. And before I go into anything more about the wickedness of the Pharisees and all this stuff, when Paul is talking about there's no difference between the Jew and the Gentile, he's saying there's no difference between the Jew first and the Gentile. If the Jew is wicked, he's going to get punished. If he's righteous, he's going to get blessed. If the Gentile or the Greek is wicked, he's going to get cursed. If that Greek is righteous, he's going to be saved. But once again, we got to understand why he keeps saying Greek and how we can tie this in and prove that these Greeks are Israelites. Now, we can sit back and talk about, the diasporas and stuff, but a lot of hard-headed Israelites need a little more proof than that, right? So let's prove this. Let's go there. 1 Maccabees 12 and 20.
1 Maccabees chapter 12, verse 20. Arius, king of the Lacedaemonians, to Onias, the high priest, greeting. It is found in writing that the Lacedaemonians and Jews are brethren.
Stop. Now this writing was set up written to the Lacedaemonians because the Jews were fighting in war and needed allies. So they had to sit back and write letters and get outward allies to help fight these Greeks that were attacking them. But they're like, let's go to our brothers who are Greeks to help get allies against these Greeks that are trying to wipe us out. So listen, the high priest said this: it is found in writing that the Lacedaemonians and Jews are brethren. Read on.
God. And that they are of the stock of Abraham.
Now I'm going to sit back here if you can. Look at the map that we have up here. you'll see this land. It says the territory of Lacedaemonians or Lacedaemonia. And in the territory of Lacedaemonia, you're going to get Sparta. That's where you get your Spartans from. Your Spartans are Lacedaemonians. Okay? And all this area in southern Greece was the territory of the Lacedaemonians. Okay? Read verse 21 again.
Verse 21.
Look at the screen so you can see it if you choose to. Read on.
It is found in writing that the Lacedaemonians and Jews are brethren.
So we had a history even in Jerusalem that our brothers were scattered already outside in European countries. We knew it. Read on.
And that they are of the stock of Abraham.
And we knew that they were Israelites in Greece that were the stock of Abraham. They just didn't know who they were. They called themselves Lacedaemonians. And the funny thing is, it's almost like Onias was writing to him saying that, we know that you guys are our brothers. Whether they knew it or not, they didn't say it. But they acknowledged them, so I'm assuming they knew. Read on.
Now therefore, since this has come to our knowledge, ye shall do well to write unto us of your prosperity.
So now they're trying to sit back and establish some kind of relationship and eventually maybe get some help in time of need. But why am I explaining this? Why am I going into this? I need that to back up. Is because this ties in to what Paul is talking about in Rome. Okay? What you're going to see, if you look at this map, we're going to switch maps and go to this other map. Now check out this map. It says the expansion of Sparta from the 8th century to 5th centuries BC. Now listen, when did the diaspora happen with the northern tribes? The northern tribes. 700 BC. So now we're going to sit back and see that the rise of the Spartans kicked in between the 8th century to 5th century BC. So you can put two and two together. After that first diaspora is when we got to Greece. And by the time we got to Greece, look at this map. It says all of these areas in dark pink, little lighter pink, and real light pink were all provinces of the Spartans. Why is that important? If the provinces of the Spartans, that means the Spartans occupied there, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Now, one of the cities that the Spartans had control over? Corinth. And that's the point. So when Paul went to Corinth, who was Paul going to?
Lacedaemonians.
He was teaching these Lacedaemonians, which were of the stock of Abraham. So now, if we understand, Paul understood, all the priests in Jerusalem understood that the Lacedaemonians in Corinth and in Sparta were the stock of Abraham. So now when you sit back and read Romans chapter 2 and verse 10, but glory, honor, peace to every man that worketh good, to the Jew first, and also to the Greek.
Hey, can I prove that?
It lets you know that the kingdom can come to the Jew or the Greek, which was at one time referred to as a Lacedaemonian, that was before then of the stock of Abraham. Does that make sense? So they weren't just sitting back here talking and looking for white people to give salvation to. There were Israelites running all through this land. They were all through Greece. But Corinth was just a major hub, and by the time, obviously, we got to crisis time, Sparta had already fell. Sparta fell, and all these Israelites just scattered around Europe, scattered around different parts of Greece.
And you can look at the Lacedaemonian artifacts, the Lacedaemonian art. The Lacedaemonian art of that time period, there were men that were jet black men on pottery. You just look up Lacedaemonian art, and it's jet black men in pottery, although they were butt naked. That's what they were.
This is why the Hebrews looked down on them. This is why the Jews, this is why the elites looked down on them, because they were operating contrary to how Hebrews operated. But the problem is, just because they were contrary didn't mean they couldn't be rehabilitated. It's no different than Israelites sitting back here set tripping, having their pants sagging, selling drugs or using drugs. Does that mean that they can't be salvaged? No. This is what Paul is saying about these Israelites that was running around here rolling like Greeks, toga partying their asses off. They were still Israelites, and if they wanted Christ and they made those necessary sacrifices, they can obtain salvation as well.
Come back.
But the beef was always inner beef, inner striving, inner hatred. Hatred amongst the nation. Whether they knew who they were or they didn't know who they were. So Paul is like, stop judging these Israelites who you know are from the stock of Abraham, but it is operating at a way lower level than you are. So yeah, they might have 100 things wrong with them. But what about the 3 things you ain't fixed? The 10 things you ain't fixed. So just because you have 10 things to fix and they got 100 makes them more wicked than you? But you know more. Yeah. So you're not justified. You're on the hook for and that's what Paul is explaining in this process. Does that make sense? But I want to make sure, even through the midst of the explanation, we can also show that these Gentiles were Greeks. But we knew as a nation, even at the time of the Maccabees, that which was correlated with the time of the Greek Empire, which is in the 300s. We knew in the 300s BC that these people were our people and they were our brothers. We knew it. So when you're reading all about there's no difference between the Jew and the Greek, he's telling you what it is. There's no difference between the Israelite who knows who he is versus these Lacedaemonians who are like Spartans and Greeks. There's no difference in our brothers. Do y'all understand? I want to stop there. Give me, because it's more meat, but I think we've gone through enough topics to kind of give clarity. Are there any questions on what we've gone over? We understand about the circumcision, right? And how the expectation was about changing what's inside of you versus just the outward changing. And yes,
sorry, I wasn't here for the name of the class.
The name of the class is it was this the controversy of circumcision versus uncircumcision. So now we understand why they were trying to sit back here and kill Paul. They were trying to kill Paul because they were saying Paul was teaching to make sure the next generation of Israelites were uncircumcised. But that wasn't even close to what Paul was teaching. Paul was just saying, listen, you have confidence in the outward versus having confidence in choosing to change what's inside of you. That was the message that got misconstrued and got taken as if the law was trying to be done away with by Paul's teachings. I know we kept drilling the concept over and over again, but we're not going to get it unless we go and take this time to explain it. Do you understand? Are there any more questions? We're going to shut it down from there. All right? Listen, Tawada for tuning in, y'all. And we will sit back here and continue in these topics. We might focus more. We'll see. We'll see what we do with this, where we go with this next week. Maybe we might go back into Galatians 3. We'll finish 11. And then we'll finish Romans 2, verse 11 down. And then we'll go probably Acts 13. And then we'll come back around and go to Galatians chapter 3 and actually really start that into a more detail. Any other questions? All right. Israel Tawada for tuning in, and we'll see you guys next Wednesday. Shabbat Shalom be it. So we'll go from there. Shalom.
Shalom.